Above the fading light of a dying star, the void churned as if reality itself were taking its final breath. The Emperor's astronomy can, that eternal psychic beacon guiding humanity through the darkness, flickered violently. Its one stable brilliance surged into chaos, pulsing with a frequency unseen in millennia. Across the galaxy, astropaths screamed as their minds filled with impossible visions, a blue flame meeting a violet storm, energy folding upon itself like a collapsing sun. Far beyond that galaxy, on a distant world where time obeyed different gods, a warrior trained beneath twin moons, Vegeta, the prince of all Saiyans, unleashed a final blast, an attack meant only to test his limits, unaware that its power was echoing across dimensions. For an instant, the universe hesitated. The astronomer Kan's psychic light collided with the Saiyan's Kai. Two incompatible forces of faith-born energy and raw life force interlocking in a cataclysmic resonance. Space twisted. Time screamed. The stars between both realms flickered like dying embers as a cosmic tear ripped open. The event defied comprehension. Even the gods of the warp paused their eternal feasts to witness it. The immaterium howled, stretching thin, spilling color, sound, and memory into one luminous scar that burned through eternity. The rift expanded outward, swallowing fleets, moons, and prayers. Across both universes, mortals and immortals alike felt it. The sensation of something greater awakening, rewriting existence itself. Through the storm, fragments of worlds collided. A cathedral planet from the Imperium's edge brushed against the dust of Beerus's domain, their skies merging into violent tapestried lightning against blue flame. Energy bled between them like veins of molten gold. In that impossible moment, Vegeta stood motionless, hair rising with the static of godly power. The ground beneath him trembled, not from fear but recognition. His aura flared against the distortion, and for the first time in his life, he felt resistance not from an opponent, but from creation itself pushing back. He smirked. So even the universe dares to challenge me. The explosion that followed was beyond light. Planets turned to vapor. The warp roared like a wounded beast, devouring the rift and everything caught within its grasp. From the Eye of Terror to the furthest edge of known space, demons chanted, their voices unified in maddening praise. The stranger comes, they hissed through dimensions. The one who defies the throne. The Astronomicon faltered and died in a heartbeat, plunging 1,000 ships into darkness. Then, as suddenly as it began, the rift closed, leaving only silence, a few drifting corpses of stars, and a faint, lingering glow. Within the heart of the Immaterium, amid currents of thought and nightmare, a body fell through the void. Flames wrapped around it, defiant against the warp's corruption. Vegeta's armor cracked, his blood shimmered in the storm, yet his will remained unbroken. The demons swarmed like carrion drawn to divinity, whispering promises of power, of conquest without end. But the Saiyan's aura burned brighter, slicing through them with each pulse of Kai. His consciousness flickered between realities, struggling against the pull of madness. Through sheer pride, he anchored himself an unyielding while refusing to drown in chaos. The Immaterium, sensing his defiance, recoiled. He awoke, gasping amid the shattered ruins of a city bathed in crimson fire. Ash drifted through the air like snow, coating the broken statues of winged men and burning cathedrals. The smell of iron, oil, and blood filled the wind. Vegeta rose, his eyes narrowing as he surveyed the devastation. The sky above was a tapestry of storm and lightning, alien stars bleeding through layers of black clouds. Massive war banners depicting a two-headed eagle hung torn across metal towers. He tilted his head, smirking at the sight. Another empire of gods and weaklings, he muttered. As he took his first step forward, the ground cracked beneath him, glowing faintly with residual warp energy. He could still feel the presence of something watching human intelligence, vast and cold, like the void itself taking measure of his existence. His aura surged reflexively, golden and violet light blending as the dust around him turned to glass. Far beyond the ruined skyline, in a fortress of stone and machine, alarms blared in languages he did not understand. Across distant systems, psychic sensors flared, marking his arrival as an anomaly beyond classification. In that single moment, two universes became aware of each other and both realized something terrifying. A new power had entered their war. The city stretched endlessly, a maze of iron towers and choking smog. The air was thick with ash and incense, heavy with the smell of burned oil and sanctified fear. Vegeta stood at the edge of a colossal plaza, gazing across an ocean of humanity. Tens of thousands moved in synchronized lines, their heads bowed, their lips murmuring the same name, the Emperor. The sound rose and fell like the rhythm of a machine, hollow and haunting. Bells tolled from spires that reached for a sky smothered in industrial haze. Above them, titanic statues of armored saints watched with blank, eternal eyes. To Vegeta, it was less a city and more a tomb, a civilization praying to its own shadow. He took a slow breath, his senses adjusting to this strange, suffocating atmosphere. The air here carried no freedom, no challenge, no pulse of power. Only obedience. He scanned the crowds, noting how each person's movements were measured, their faith absolute. Men and women wore symbols of devotion carved into metal plates bolted to their chests. They knelt before banners depicting a skeletal god upon a throne. Even children, faces smudged with soot, raised candles as they whispered prayers against heresy. Vegeta's brow furrowed. Pathetic, he muttered under his breath. They worship power, yet none of them possess it. A procession entered the square, robbing priests bearing relics, their voices amplified by vox systems that crackled through the thick fog. "By his will you endure," they cried. The people responded in unison, "By his light we are cleansed." The chant vibrated through the stone, echoing in the depths of the hive city. Vegeta's eyes followed the movement of servitors dragging incense burners larger than tanks, their bodies half machine, half corpse. It was a world enslaved by ritual. He folded his arms, smirking. "So this is your God's empire," he said softly. "All faith and no strength." The moment didn't go unnoticed. A group of armored enforcers, the Adeptus Arbites, spotted him standing defiantly amid the crowd. Their visors reflected the golden light of his aura, though faint now, suppressed beneath the dense atmosphere. They approached cautiously, vox voices filtered and harsh. "Citizen, identify yourself," one barked. Vegeta ignored them. "Last warning," another shouted, leveling a shock maul glowing with energy. To them, he looked like a rogue psyker, a heretic radiating forbidden energy. When he still didn't respond, they encircled him, weapons raised. Vegeta's eyes flicked toward them lazily. "You mistake me for one of your insects," he said, voice calm but sharp enough to cut through the smog. "Instead of a Nor god." The Arbites hesitated, then one, braver or perhaps dumber than the rest, struck. The maul connected with Vegeta's armor and shattered instantly. The silence that followed lasted only a heartbeat before the world exploded in light. Vegeta's aura erupted in a violent flare, gold and violet waves tearing through the plaza like a thunderclap. Stone melted, banners incinerated, and the statues of saints cracked and fell as a sphere of energy radiated outward. The chanting stopped. Thousands dropped to their knees, shielding their faces from the impossible brilliance. When the dust settled, the plaza was gone, a crater smoldering with molten metal where devotion had once stood. Vegeta hovered above the destruction, eyes glowing faintly. "If this is heresy," he said, voice echoing across the ruins, "then your God should be afraid." The survivors stared in awe and terror. Some whispered prayers, others screamed for the Arbites to call reinforcements. Within moments, alarms blared across the hive. Sirens wailed from distant towers as red warning lights bathed the skyline. Across the planet, Imperial Auspex arrays flared alive, detecting an unprecedented power surge. Tech priests muttered in disbelief, their data screens flashing the same code over and over. Alpha-level threat detected. In orbit, a battle fleet turned its scanners toward the surface, transmitting images of a lone figure hovering amid destruction. The data reached the Inquisition within minutes. In the shadowed halls of terror, a single name was recorded in ancient script: unknown entity, potential godform manifestation. Below, Vegeta landed amidst the smoke, his cloak of energy fading, his gaze fixed on the horizon where massive Gothic towers pierced the clouds. He smirked again, unfazed by the chaos he had unleashed. "So," he said quietly, "the real challenge begins." In the cold void above Armageddon, data streams pulsed across flickering Auspex displays aboard the Imperial flagship Saint Invigilant. Inside a chamber lit by candlelight and holo projections, Inquisitor Thalassa stood motionless before the main viewer. The footage looped endlessly, a crater where a city once stood, a flash of light brighter than plasma fire, and then nothing. For precisely 2 frames, a figure appeared suspended midair, its body radiating golden and violet energy. The sensors, designed to track warp incursions and alien ships, struggled to render the movement. It was as if the being existed between frames, slipping through reality faster than the machine could comprehend. Thalassa narrowed her eyes. "Pause," she commanded softly. The screen froze on a blurred silhouette, humanoid, armored, glowing. The Inquisitor's face remained unreadable beneath the hood of her black cloak, but the faint tightening of her jaw betrayed unease. Around her, a council of adepts whispered furiously, their cogitators spitting out conflicting results. "Energy classification unknown," one muttered. "Readings fluctuate between psychic, plasma, and gravitational signatures." Another spoke shakily. "My lady, the power output exceeds that of an exterminator strike." Thalassa turned toward him, her voice a whisper sharper than steel. "Then you understand what that means." Silence fell. The only sound was the mechanical hum of data cores struggling to process the impossible. Hours later, deep within the ship's sanctum, the debate began. Tech priests argued the entity was a warp-born manifestation. Xeno scholars proposed it was an unrecorded god form from an alternate reality. The ecclesiarch representatives insisted it was a test of faith, a false prophet sent to tempt mankind. And amidst the cacophony, Thalassa listened, unmoving. Finally, she spoke. "This creature annihilated a sector plaza with one motion. He did not summon the warp, he defied it. That is not heresy, that is power." The council stared, unsure if her tone was reverent or afraid. A single word appeared on the data scroll before her. "Exterminatus recommended." She stared at it for a long time before shaking her head. "No, not yet. I would see him first." Far below, the man in question stood atop the shattered remains of a basilica, arms crossed as wind carried the scent of burning metal. His aura had dimmed, yet the ground still trembled faintly around him. Vegeta gazed toward the sky, sensing countless weak energies, life forms buzzing like insects in the distance, watching, analyzing. The notion amused him. "So," he murmured, "they think their machines can measure me." His lips curved into a smirk, pride rekindled. This was a universe obsessed with hierarchy, devotion, and fear of power. It reminded him of Frieza's empire, only grander, older, more desperate. "Good," he said quietly. "Let's see what they've got." Back aboard Saint Invigilant, Thalassa stared out at the viewport. "He's not warp-touched," she whispered to herself. "He's something new." Her psychic senses tingled, faint, fleeting, like a voice trying to whisper through static. It wasn't coming from the creature below. It was coming from beyond. The candles flickered, their flames bending in unnatural rhythm. A shadow passed through the chamber, silent yet immense. The adept screamed as one of the servo skulls fell from the air, its sensors bursting into white noise. Thalassa steadied herself, whispering a single prayer under her breath. "Emperor, preserve me." In the unseen depths of the immaterium, ripples formed. The warp stirred restlessly, as though it too had seen the footage. From the swirling chaos, laughter echoed, deep, mocking, ancient. Korn's growl shook the void. "Another warrior," he snarled, "one who kills without worship." Tzingchi's 1,000 eyes blinked open, fascinated by the anomaly that defied prophecy. Slanesh sighed, intrigued by the perfection of pride uncorrupted, and Nurgle chuckled, slow and patient. "A new seed of decay," he mused, born of strength. The warp itself began to vibrate with curiosity, every god whispering the same word in unison. Vegeta. On the surface, the Scion's eyes flicked upward. The wind fell silent, the air thick with an unseen weight. For the first time since entering this universe, he felt something vast pressing back, not an enemy, but an awareness. A grin tugged at his lips. "Finally," he said, "a universe that knows I'm here." His aura sparked again, golden flames cutting through the ash. Far above, Thalassa watched the sensors spike into chaos, unaware that her whispered curiosity had already drawn the attention of horrors that even she could not imagine. The dawn over Armageddon Secundus was no dawn at all, just the sky bleeding orange from 1,000 burning manufactorums. The air was thick with soot, the clouds pulsing red from distant artillery strikes. Sirens wailed through the hive spires, echoing like cries of the damned. On the horizon, the banners of the Aquila rose defiantly, their tattered edges glowing in the firelight. Steel giants of the Astra Militarum rolled forward in formation, lemon rust tanks grinding over rubble, basilisks deploying their cannons with sacred precision. Over the Vox network, a single phrase repeated endlessly, shouted by men who had never once seen mercy. "For the Emperor, for holy terror. In the heart of the devastation stood Vegeta, arms crossed, cape of smoke curling behind him. His armor shimmered faintly with residual Kai, scorched but unbroken. Around him, the remains of the Arbite's fortress still smoldered from his earlier outburst. He gazed upward as Valkyrie gunships screamed overhead, their wings slicing through the haze. Each vessel bore the mark of imperial devotion scriptures etched into its hull, purity seals fluttering in the wind. To the soldiers inside, this was a sacred battle. To Vegeta, it was noise. The first shells fell a barrage of roaring steel and burning plasma that turned the city into a storm of destruction. The impact struck him like a rain of sparks. When the smoke cleared, Vegeta was still there untouched, unflinching. His aura flared once, vaporizing the remaining fire. He raised a single hand, and the ground cracked outward. The next salvo never landed. His Kai burst outward in a wave, flipping tanks like toys, tearing through the air with deafening force. For a moment, it looked as though the army had been erased. But the silence lasted only seconds before new roars answered him, war cries echoing through the ruin. Through the smoke, more soldiers emerged. Whole regiments advanced, their boots pounding in unison. Mortars fired. Grenadiers knelt in prayer before launching missiles. Each man moved as if already dead, fighting not to win but to serve. Vegeta blinked, a faint laugh escaping his throat. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered. These weren't warriors like the Saiyans, these were mortals whose courage outweighed their worth. Yet their eyes, there was something there. Not fear, not despair, faith. When a stray shell exploded beside him, he didn't dodge. He let the fire wash over him, studying their persistence. Every time he leveled a street with his energy, another platoon took its place. They charged through dust and flame, shouting hymns instead of screams. "For the Emperor," they roared, as if belief itself could shield them from annihilation. High above, a basilisk cannon rotated, its barrel glowing red. The shell it fired screamed through the air like divine judgment, detonating at Vegeta's feet in a blinding burst. The shockwave flattened everything for a kilometer, leaving a crater that glowed molten orange. When the light faded, he was kneeling, head bowed, cloak torn but unscathed. For the first time, his expression softened. These humans, they were fragile beyond measure, and yet they refused to yield. He could crush planets, yet they fought him with nothing but conviction. The thought made him grin. "So," he said quietly, rising from the crater, "this is what it means to believe." He extended his palm. The energy that gathered there was silent, cold, no longer fueled by arrogance, but by acknowledgement. The Kai orb expanded until it eclipsed the ruins with violet-white light. He launched it skyward, and for a heartbeat, the heavens themselves split. The blast struck the enemy line miles away, erasing tanks, walls, and towers in one silent pulse. When the light vanished, the battlefield was glass-black, smooth, and still. Smoke drifted like ghosts through the aftermath. Vegeta floated above it, his reflection staring back at him from the molten surface. Below, the surviving soldiers did not flee. A handful crawled to their knees, burned, bleeding, but still raising their lasguns toward the sky. One of them, a Camisar with half his face charred, lifted his sword and shouted through cracked lips, "The Emperor protects." The phrase echoed, weak yet unbroken. Vegeta's eyes narrowed, the smirk fading from his face. He landed silently before the dying man, studying him with something that almost resembled respect. The soldier's hand trembled but never lowered the weapon. Vegeta's gaze lingered a moment longer before he turned away, voice low. "You're fools," he said, "but brave ones." As he walked toward the horizon, the sound of fresh engines rumbled in the distance, another wave of Imperial reinforcements. He exhaled slowly, watching the crimson light wash across the ruins. "Maybe," he murmured, "this universe isn't as boring as I thought." The last shot of the scene lingered on the scorched Aquila banner fluttering amidst ash and silence, still standing. The world had gone silent after the last blast. The wind carried only dust, and the crackle of scorched metal echoed faintly through the ruins. Vegeta stood alone amid the wasteland he'd created, arms at his sides, breathing steady, aura flickering faint gold like a dying star. Yet beneath the stillness, something else stirred. The air itself began to hum, a low vibration that crawled into his chest and resonated with every heartbeat. He frowned, glancing upward. "Another fleet already?" he muttered, but the pressure that filled the sky was not mechanical. It was ancient, immeasurable. The world darkened as if the sun had bent its knee to something greater. Then, without sound or warning, the voice arrived. It wasn't heard, it was felt. 1,000 whispers condensed into one tone that vibrated through every molecule of existence. You burn like a comet fallen through creation. The words struck through him with the weight of galaxies. Vegeta staggered slightly, his mind flashing with images, not his own, a throne of gold, endless souls in prayer, a corpse that ruled eternity. He clenched his teeth. Who dares speak to me like that? I am the light that guides the lost, the flame that endures when all else fades. The pressure intensified. Lightning rippled across the sky. Every mortal on Armageddon dropped to their knees, clutching their heads as the Astronomicon itself pulsed in unison with the Emperor's thoughts. But Vegeta did not kneel. His aura ignited violently, shattering the air around him. "Enough riddles," he shouted. "Show yourself." A blinding radiance filled the horizon, golden and eternal. In that instant, time folded. Vegeta was no longer standing on the battlefield. He stood instead in a void of white fire, an ocean of light stretching without beginning or end. Before him towered a figure made of pure energy, vast beyond comprehension, neither alive nor dead. The Emperor's presence radiated sorrow and authority, each word a pulse of psychic thunder. "You are far from your stars, prince of another sun. You arrive like a storm with no purpose." Vegeta scowled, crossing his arms, though the gesture meant little before such immensity. "Purpose? My purpose is power. That's what drives all life worth remembering." The golden being's light dimmed slightly, as though the universe itself sighed. "Power without duty is decay. You burn worlds, but you build nothing. You conquer, yet remain alone. Even the gods you knew turned you into their jest." For a moment, Vegeta's breath caught. He wanted to snarl, to deny the truth in the words, but something deeper pressed against his mind. Memories of Beerus's dismissive smile, Wise's laughter, his own endless striving that never filled the silence inside. The Emperor's tone softened. "You are not the first to believe strength defines worth. I once did too, and now I sit upon a throne of ash. Tell me, Saiyan, will you rule the same way?" Vegeta's fists tightened. He looked up into that infinite light, defiance flaring. "You speak of duty like it's something noble, but what has it given you? You're a god chained to your own corpse." "Sacrifice," the Emperor answered simply, "and the knowledge that even gods must serve something greater than themselves." For the first time since entering this universe, Vegeta said nothing. The light around him pulsed once more, fading slowly as reality began to reclaim its shape. Before it vanished completely, the Emperor's final words echoed through the void. "You were not sent here by accident, fallen comet. The galaxy reshapes itself through those who seek meaning beyond victory. Find yours or be forgotten." When Vegeta's vision cleared, he was kneeling amid the ruins once again. His hands trembled slightly, though not from weakness. The battlefield was quiet, but the voice lingered in the back of his mind, an afterimage of divinity. He exhaled slowly, gazing at his reflection in the molten glass below. "What does it mean," he muttered, "to rule what you don't understand?" The wind carried no answer, only the distant tolling of imperial bells, like echoes from a god still watching. The ruins of the Hive City still smoldered when Vegeta found the Manufactorum. Once, it had been the heart of the world's industry, a vast cathedral of iron and fire, where machine spirits sang in the language of steel. Now it lay silent, its forges dark, its conveyor lines frozen mid-motion. Vegeta stepped through the shattered gates, boots clanging on rusted grates. Massive servitors hung from chains like dead giants, their eyes dark, their flesh fused with cold metal. The air smelled of oil, dust, and the faint ozone of forgotten power. He looked around, faintly amused. "A temple to labor," he murmured, "abandoned by its gods." He moved deeper inside, his aura casting long golden shadows across the chamber. Control panels flickered weakly, as if the machines themselves recognized something alien yet familiar. When his hand brushed a console, it sparked violently, lines of binary code scrolling across shattered screens. For the first time since his arrival, Vegeta felt the world respond. The circuits hummed, gears turned, and somewhere deep within the factory, furnaces ignited in defiance of death. The machine spirits stirred. "So even metal kneels before power," he said, smirking. "Maybe this universe isn't entirely hopeless." His moment of reflection ended abruptly. A thunderous impact shook the ceiling, followed by the crash of ceramite boots. The doors exploded inward, and figures in crimson and gold armor stormed through astartes, the angels of death. Their bolters gleamed beneath holy sigils, each step carrying the weight of devotion. Their leader's voice boomed through a vox grill. By the Emperor's will, you are condemned, Xenos. The soldiers fanned out, weapons locking on. Vegeta's expression didn't change. Another sermon, he said softly, almost disappointed. Fine. Let's see what your faith is worth. The first barrage came like thunderbolts screaming through the air, detonating with each impact. The explosions engulfed him in smoke, shredding walls and melting steel. But as the echoes faded, Vegeta stepped forward unharmed. His eyes glowed gold, his smirk sharp. Impressive toys, he said, and vanished. The Marines turned, too slow. One was struck mid-charge, armor imploding under a single blow. Another fired point-blank. Vegeta caught the bolt mid-air, crushing it between his fingers before driving his fist into the warrior's chestplate. The sound was like metal collapsing inward. Within seconds, the strike team lay scattered alive but broken, their faith reduced to disbelief. The commander staggered to his feet, chain-sword trembling. "Demon!" he gasped. "You mock the Emperor himself." Vegeta paused, then reached down and lifted the Marine's banner from the rubble, a tattered cloth bearing the double-headed eagle, scorched but intact. He stared at it, silent for a long moment. "No," he said finally. "I don't mock him. I challenge him." With one motion, he planted the banner into the ground beside him, the symbol catching fire in his aura until the gold eagle shimmered with violet flame. "From now on," he declared, voice echoing through the factory halls, "this galaxy answers to me." Outside, lightning erupted across the skies. His aura flared higher, merging gold with deep amethyst, a radiance neither warp-born nor mortal. The machines around him responded, panels lighting, engines roaring back to life. Tech priests hidden in the shadows fell to their knees, their mechadendrites quivering in awe. They whispered binary prayers, not of worship, but reverence. To them, he was no heretic. He was a revelation, the union of flesh, energy, and machine. In that moment, the Manufactorum's heart roared awake, a beacon burning through the night. Across the Imperium, the story spread like wildfire. The Vox networks carried a single, forbidden phrase whispered among soldiers and priests alike. The heretic king has risen. And far above, the Inquisition's Auspex arrays registered a flare of power unlike anything since the Emperor's ascension. Vegeta stepped through the heat and smoke, eyes fixed on the horizon. His voice, low but resolute, carried like thunder through the wind. "Next," he said, "I will find your Emperor." The fire reflected in his armor made him look less like a man and more like a legend, a god forged in defiance, crowned in steel. Armageddon Prime lay in ruins, a horizon of smoke, ash, and broken monuments. The once-proud hive world, a crown jewel of the Imperium's industrial might, had become a graveyard of twisted spires and molten cathedrals. Amid the wreckage stood Vegeta, motionless atop a mountain of steel and bone. His aura shimmered faintly, gold laced with violet, casting long shadows through the dust-choked air. The ground beneath him hummed with unnatural energy, even the dying machinery seemed to vibrate in rhythm with his pulse. From this height he could see the shattered remains of a civilization that had once believed itself eternal, and now, for the first time in its history, bowed to something not human. Below, remnants of the Astra Militarum gathered, ragged and defeated. They no longer fought, they simply watched. Some knelt out of exhaustion, others out of reverence. No orders compelled them. It was instinct, the same instinct that drives men to kneel before a storm. The Vox systems across the city crackled and failed as his aura interfered with their transmissions. Machine spirits flickered erratically, Auspex readings bent and broke under the strain. What was once sacred circuitry now sang in his frequency. Even the planet's own noosphere, the invisible web of data that connected the Mechanicus, began to distort around his presence. For the first time, Armageddon's heart no longer beat for the Emperor, it beat for him. A squad of red-robed figures emerged from the smoke. The surviving members of the Adeptus Mechanicus approached slowly, their mechanical limbs clanking against debris. Their leader, Mygo's engineer Vahor, stopped several meters away and raised a trembling mechadendrite in salute. "The Omnissiah, incarnate," he whispered through static-filled vox. The prophecy of the Iron Star fulfilled. His words echoed across the broken plaza, carried by the wind like scripture. Others followed, repeating the phrase with reverent certainty. Vegeta raised an eyebrow, amused but silent. He had no interest in their religion, yet the power of their devotion was undeniable. "You mistake me for your god," he said finally. I am not here to save your machines. I am here to rule them. The Magos lowered his head. Then we serve Iron Prince, he said without hesitation. It wasn't faith that moved them, it was logic. The Mechanicus bowed to power, and nothing in the data scrolls spoke against what they now witnessed. They understood energy, dominance, efficiency, and Vegeta was all three incarnate. When he turned his gaze toward the burning skyline, hundreds of servitors activated across the ruins, their dead eyes glowing faintly gold. Assembly lines that had lain silent for years began to tremble, gears grinding into motion. The manufactorums roared to life, smoke billowing once more into the heavens. The planet stirred from its death throes as though obeying his unspoken command. Vegeta stepped forward onto a raised dais that had once held the statue of an imperial saint. The monument now lay shattered at his feet. He raised his voice, and the words carried across the ruins like a commandment. You have lived under gods who take. I will be a god who commands. His tone wasn't cruel, it was final. Every soldier, every servitor, every tech priest froze. The weight of his authority filled the air like gravity itself. He wasn't shouting. He didn't need to. His voice resonated through the metal and the minds of those who still lived. You will rebuild this world, he continued, not for faith, not for penance, but for strength. Weakness is rot, and I do not rule out rot. Silence followed, thick and absolute. Then, slowly, the city began to move. Troopers dragged debris aside. Magi transmitted orders through binary prayer. Cranes lifted fallen walls, factories reignited their furnaces, and the first sparks of reconstruction cut through the ash-dark sky. Armageddon was being reborn, not in the Emperor's name, but under the will of a Saiyan. Vegeta watched the transformation, eyes narrowed in thought. Power was meaningless without purpose, the Emperor had said as much. Yet as he stood amidst obedience not born of faith but awe, he began to understand something different. Leadership wasn't given. It was taken, shaped, and enforced. The Vox systems flickered to life again, this time not in panic but in submission. Across the planet, broadcasts repeated the same coded message. New command authority designated. The Iron Prince. The phrase spread like wildfire through surviving regiments and Mechanicus enclaves alike. In the darkness of space, fleets began transmitting fragmented signals of alarm. The Imperium's hierarchy stirred, uncertain whether to classify the event as heresy or miracle. Vegeta stood at the heart of it all, silent, resolute, surrounded by the hum of engines newly loyal to him. The sky glowed crimson from the fires of industry reignited. So this is what it means to rule, he said softly, more to himself than anyone else, to turn fear into function. His cape rippled in the heat as he gazed upward toward the void, where the Emperor's unseen eyes surely watched. You built your empire on faith, he murmured, a faint grin forming. I'll build mine on power. The bells of Armageddon tolled through smoke and ruin, their cracked tones calling the faithful to arms. From the upper tiers of the hive cathedrals, ecclesiarchs in gilded robes shouted sermons of defiance into the toxic wind. The false god walks among us, they cried, their voices trembling with both terror and zeal. He is the deceiver of the flesh, the blight of man's faith. Burn his image, and let the Emperor's light purge this abomination. Below, the crowd shifted uneasily. The banners of the Aquila fluttered beside torn standards now bearing Vegeta's sigil, a crowned star of iron etched hastily on reclaimed metal. The planet stood divided between two gods, each unseen by the other, but equally feared. Vegeta stood before one of the great cathedrals, his boots crunching over rubble still glowing with the heat of forge fires. The once-proud edifice towered over him, its spires stabbing upward like accusing fingers. Through shattered stained glass, he could see hundreds of civilians kneeling, whispering prayers for deliverance. At the front, priests chanted with desperate intensity, voices echoing like thunder through the vaulted halls. He listened for a while, his arms folded, expression unreadable. They cling to their illusions, he muttered, even after I've given them something real. The doors burst open as the Arbeitsstern zealots charged out, their weapons blazing. They fired without hesitation, bolts streaking through the smoky air, but the blasts disintegrated before touching him, swallowed by his aura. The heat around him rose, the color of his power shifting from gold to white-hot brilliance. Enough, he said quietly, his voice carrying farther than any explosion. He raised his palm, and light flooded the world. The cathedral shook, its windows bursting outward in a storm of color. The shockwave swept through the plaza like a divine wind, vaporizing the zealots instantly. The great tower folded inward, its stained glass depicting the Emperor's ascension shattering into a rain of molten fragments. When the light faded, nothing remained of the upper spire but drifting ash. Yet not all within perished. Amid the smoke, survivors emerged, children, wounded civilians, and a handful of priests too terrified to flee. One old cleric, robes singed and eyes wide, stumbled forward and collapsed to his knees. "Why?" he croaked. "If you are not a demon, why destroy his house?" Vegeta regarded him for a long moment, his aura dimming to a soft glow. "Because your god has abandoned you," he said, his tone neither cruel nor mocking. "He left you to die in devotion while your world burned. I'll give you something he couldn't, a reason to survive." The priest trembled, torn between anger and awe. "And what would you have us worship then?" Vegeta looked past him to the cathedral's fallen doors. The fires reflected in his eyes like stars. "Not me," he said. "Strength? The will to stand when everything else falls." He turned away, his cloak catching the light as the embers swirled around him. Behind him, the priest lowered his head, whispering words that no longer sounded like prayer. Across the planet, the purge spread. Vegeta's Enforcers Mechanicus loyalists and soldiers bound by fear and respect stormed temples that refused to bend. Cathedrals once sanctified with centuries of worship became crucibles of light, as his energy cleansed them of resistance. But with every structure leveled, he spared those who did not fight. Civilians were relocated, children escorted from collapsing shrines by the same warriors who destroyed them. The propaganda of terror twisted into a paradox. The heretic king kills the faithful but saves the helpless. Within days, whispers changed tone. "He punishes weakness, not belief," they said. "Perhaps his will is the Emperor's test." When the final bells fell silent, Armageddon's skyline had changed. Spires of gold lay replaced by the gleam of Reforged's steel shrines to the Emperor, were rebuilt as fortresses under the Iron Prince's mark. Vegeta stood at the edge of a reconstruction platform, watching the rebuilt city shimmer under the storm-lit sky. "Faith," he murmured, "isn't the enemy. It's an excuse." He clenched his fist, the aura around it pulsing with restrained power. They'll learn the difference soon enough. In that moment, for the first time, even he seemed uncertain whether what he built was order or tyranny. The warp churned like a living storm beyond the veil of reality, a sea of thought and madness, of emotion made flesh and hunger given form. Within its depths, the great powers stirred, their awareness drawn to a new disturbance in the cosmic order. A flicker of gold had appeared in their domain, alien, untethered, defiant. The raw echo of Vegeta's energy rippled through the immaterium like a sun colliding with shadow. The demons howled and scattered, their chants dissolving into panic and ecstasy. The gods of chaos turned their gaze toward the source. Korn was the first to speak, his voice a bellow that split galaxies. "I smell battle," he growled, his laughter shaking the void. "Blood spilled without worship. Rage without sacrifice. He is mine." His throne of skulls trembled with anticipation, each trophy skull grinning as the echoes of Vegeta's destruction reverberated across the warp. But Tzinj, ever-changing, merely smiled within his fractal citadel of lies. "No," he whispered, his tone both mocking and amused. "This one is made of flesh, a purpose that shifts yet endures. Imagine what chaos could do if it wore such discipline." His thousands of eyes blinked in unison, each revealing a different possible future where Vegeta ruled, fell, or ascended beyond gods themselves. Slaanesh reclined in her palace of sensation, the air alive with whispers of pleasure and pride. "Such beauty in defiance," she purred, tracing the air where his image shimmered in golden flame. "He does not serve. He does not bow. He believes himself untouchable. How divine." Her laughter rolled like velvet thunder, sweet and poisonous. In the farthest depths, Nurgle's chuckle oozed through the decay. "Ah, my dear siblings," he wheezed, voice thick with rot and mirth. "Do you not see? He is not a weapon, he is a cure. Too much strength breeds rot. Too much purity breeds weakness. He is balanced, and balance always falls to decay." The four voices intertwined, forming a harmony of corruption, each god reaching toward the same mind through different guises. On Armageddon, beneath a sky lit by furnace fire, Vegeta slept. Exhaustion had claimed him after days of conquest and rebuilding. But in his dreams the air shifted, cold, sweet, endless. He stood in a void of soft light, surrounded by whispers that sounded like his own thoughts. "You have no equals," a voice said gently, melodic as a lullaby. "You defy gods, yet what are you without them? Alone." The light took shape, a figure formed from his own reflection, crowned and radiant. "You could be more," it said, "beyond mortal or divine. The warp bends to those who accept its gift. Take it, and every universe will kneel." Vegeta's breath slowed. For a moment, the temptation gleamed bright, infinite strength, infinite dominion. He could see himself as more than a ruler, more than a warrior, a god beyond gods. The reflection smiled wider, its voice coaxing. "You have already remade one world. Imagine all of them burning under your crown." His fists clenched. The air shimmered, heat waves bending through the dream. "You think power is something you can give me," he hissed. "Power is earned." The dream twisted violently as his aura exploded outward, golden light ripping through the illusion. The voice screamed, no longer seductive but furious, as the vision shattered like glass. Vegeta woke abruptly, eyes burning with fire, the ground beneath his bed cracking under the surge of Ki. A column of light burst skyward, tearing through the Manufactorum's roof, piercing the heavens. In orbit, sensors flared with impossible readings. In the warp, the gods recoiled, their amusement curdling into rage. "Foolish mortal," Slaanesh hissed. "He rejects perfection." "Good," Khorne rumbled, grinning. "Let him fight me instead." Tzinch laughed, his voice echoing across time. "He refuses corruption, yet the warp never forgets." As their voices faded, a faint mark lingered in the currents of unreality, a golden ember amidst infinite darkness. The Immaterium whispered a new name into its chaos-born scriptures: Vegeta, the Iron Prince. It was not worship, but acknowledgement, a presence the gods could neither bend nor banish. On the mortal plane, Vegeta stood on the balcony of his fortress, looking out over the glowing skyline of his conquered world. The night was silent except for the hum of machinery. "You can whisper all you want," he said softly, staring into the stars. "But I don't kneel." His aura flickered once more, fierce and unwavering, cutting through the darkness like a blade of light. The vaulted halls of the Imperial Palace were silent except for the echo of boots on marble and the distant hiss of incense burning. Golden light filtered through high windows carved with the sigils of 1,000,000 worlds, but it did not warm the chamber. It merely illuminated the shadows of men who ruled in fear. The High Lords of Terror were gathered, 12 figures seated around a table of black adamantine, each cloaked in authority that felt hollow beneath the weight of the unseen. Behind them, statues of saints loomed like silent judges, their stone eyes fixed on the living. Grand Provost Marshal Veritas was the first to speak. His voice, though measured, betrayed unease. "The anomaly on Armageddon continues to expand influence," he said, gesturing toward a hololithic projection above the table. It showed flickering images of Vegeta's Manufactorum fortress, a glowing beacon of unnatural energy. Reports confirm the Mechanicus have pledged allegiance. Regiments now refer to him as the Iron Prince. "If he consolidates this foothold, he won't," interrupted Cardinal Bastion, pounding his fist upon the table. "He cannot be allowed to. This thing is heresy incarnate, a false god commanding the faithful. Burn the planet. Cleanse it." His words reverberated through the chamber, a storm of fanaticism. Others shifted uncomfortably. Lord Militant Voss leaned forward, eyes sharp beneath his cap. "Exterminatus would cripple half the segmentum," he countered. "We're talking about a planet vital to our supply lines. And if this, Scion, is as powerful as they claim, an orbital strike might not even kill him." A thin woman in black armor spoke next, voice cool and deliberate. "The Inquisition concurs." All eyes turned toward her. Inquisitor Thalassa stepped into the light, her presence stilling the room. Her reputation preceded her, the woman who had witnessed the destruction firsthand. "I have seen the footage," she continued. "He is not warp-touched, nor demon-born. His power is his own, untainted by the Immaterium. If we destroy him blindly, we may lose the only being capable of understanding the Emperor's design." The Cardinal hissed blasphemy. Thalassa's gaze was unflinching. Truth. She activated a small holo-emitter on her wrist. The chamber filled with light, an image of Vegeta hovering amidst fire, surrounded by kneeling soldiers. The projection crackled with faint static, as if the very machine recoiled from displaying him. He commands obedience through will, not faith. These people follow him because he proves strength exists beyond doctrine. The room fell silent. None dared speak against the image. It was not worship, but something far more dangerous, respect. Then, the air in the chamber changed. A faint vibration rippled through the floor. Subtle yet unmistakable. Candles flickered. The hololiths dimmed, screens turning to static. Every mind in the room felt it, a pressure pressing inward, vast and divine. The golden throne, seated deep beneath the palace, stirred. A whisper echoed across the hall, not in sound but thought. A presence older than all of them. The Emperor's consciousness brushed reality, his psychic light spreading like dawn through the walls. The custards outside the chamber knelt instinctively, their eyes glowing faintly with reflection of the divine. The High Lords froze, unable to move or breathe, their minds filled with a golden horizon that seemed to stretch into eternity. Within that brilliance, the Emperor saw. His perception crossed the void faster than light, touching the warp's surface without falling into it. He reached beyond the veil, seeking the one whose presence had torn balance from the galaxy's heart. The echo of Vegeta's energy burned like a star against the blackness of space. The Emperor's gaze fixed upon it. Across the stars, in his fortress on Armageddon, Vegeta paused mid-command, eyes narrowing. For a heartbeat, everything went still. The hum of machines, the movement of soldiers, even the air. He felt something vast watching him, something neither alive nor dead, familiar yet alien. It was not a challenge, but recognition. Back on Terra, the glow faded. The High Lords collapsed into their seats, gasping, trembling from what they could not describe. Velassa's hands shook as she whispered, he noticed. Lord Voss wiped sweat from his brow. Who? The Emperor, she said. And he's looking at him. No one dared speak after that. The chamber fell into uneasy reverence, the kind reserved not for prayer but for prophecy. Deep within the golden throne, unseen by mortal eyes, a flicker of light pulsed faintly in the Emperor's gaze. Curiosity. Meditation came to him like the slow cooling of a forge. He sat on a gantry above the manufactorum's core, eyes closed, breath level, sensing the machinery thrum with a rhythm that mirrored his own. The city below labored under his command, the night above held its burning clouds. For a few heartbeats there was only silence, and then the silence broke first as a pressure behind his eyelids, then as a light that did not shine but declared. Gold filled the darkness. The air vanished, the gantry vanished, gravity itself stepped aside. Vegeta did not fall, he simply ceased to be anchored. He opened his eyes into a horizonless void where stars were ideas and time was a rumor. Two currents flowed toward one another across that emptiness. His, a disciplined flame honed by trial and pride, the other, a flood of mournful radiance like a billion prayers condensed into a single will. They met without collision, like weather fronts passing. A figure resolved from the golden throne shaped by agony and purpose, and seated within it a presence older than conquest. The Emperor did not speak, and neither did Vegeta. Words would have been smaller than the distance between them. Instead there was recognition, the sensation of a blade testing another blade. The gold searched him, measuring the temper of his pride. Vegeta let it, unblinking, and offered nothing like apology. Images rose around them, summoned by will alone. For the Emperor, legions marching into the dark, a dying age carried on a corpse that would not surrender duty. For Vegeta, a prince drowning his weakness in battle after battle, clawing strength from scorn, refusing to yield because yielding erased him. The visions braided and unbraided, and still there was no speech. The void brightened and dimmed with every exchange, as if the universe were learning to breathe through two lungs. Pressure gathered. The communion turned to contest. Gold tightened like a gauntlet, flame coiled like a serpent. When they clashed, no sound came, only consequence. Waves of light rolled outward, revising the memory of constellations that had never been born here. Where the Emperor pressed with unbreakable order, Vegeta answered with precision born of hunger. Purpose met will. Duty met self. Neither yielded, yet each adjusted a fraction, like masters correcting stance without admitting the other had taught them. Pain arrived without cruelty. Vegeta felt the mass of 1 trillion lives balanced on the Emperor's shoulders. It was a weight he could lift and yet never own. The Emperor felt the knife edge of Vegeta's solitude. It was freedom that cut the hand that grasped it. In that mutual knowing, something softened. The gold opened a fraction, revealing a loneliness so wide it looked like peace. The flame cooled a fraction, revealing patience disguised as contempt. Across the void, small details announced respect. The Emperor's light no longer tried to cage it outlined. Vegeta's fire no longer tried to scorch it clarified. For a heartbeat, without duration, their currents aligned, and the void became a single color neither had invented. Balance was not agreement, but it was acknowledgement. The throne receded. The gold dimmed, not from weakness but restraint. A boundary drew itself between them, merciful and honest. The Emperor allowed one message, not as language, but as direction. Stand toward a purpose or be devoured by your own victory. Vegeta returned one answer, not as boast but as oath. I will not kneel, but I will not waste what I can forge. The light withdrew. The manufactorum returned. Heat struck his skin. Metal groaned. Air rushed back as if grateful. Vegeta realized he was breathing harder than before. The world looked subtly different, edges cleaner, shadows more deliberate. He stood, rolling tension from his shoulders, and found that the urge to destroy had stepped aside for the urge to define. He could feel fleets staring far away, holy warriors sharpening resolve. He tasted rivalry on the air like iron. He looked up into the clouded sky, where no eyes could be seen, and yet he knew they watched. You carry a mountain, he said, voice quiet enough that only the machines heard. Fine. I'll bring a sword. In this war. The Emperor's message spread through the Imperium like a pulse in the blood of a dying god. Across the segmentum solar, silence broke. Battle stations roared to life, cathedral-sized hangars opening to the void. Fleets that had slept for centuries were awakened by the echo of a single psychic command. Prepare. The void ships of the Adeptus Custards, plated in oromite brighter than any sun, drifted from their moorings like angels taking flight. In their chambers, the Emperor's companions knelt before the sigil of terror, reciting vows so ancient that even the stars might have forgotten their first meaning. The sound was not prayer, but weaponry, each syllable a promise of perfection sharpened for war. Within the halls of Titan, the Grey Knights prepared in equal silence. The librarians gathered in a circle, their voices layering into a single chant, the psalms of binding that had once kept demons at bay. Their eyes glowed faint silver beneath their helms as they traced sigils of protection across their armor. A heretic born of light, one murmured. A god unmeasured. Then we measure him, another replied. Runes ignited across their weapons, and holy oil hissed on sanctified blades. Each knight felt the Emperor's faint warmth within his mindless command, more acknowledgement. They did not march for destruction, they marched for understanding through annihilation. From Terra's orbit to the outer colonies, transmission lines crackled with orders. War drums that had not sounded since the Horus heresy now beat once more. The Imperium was no stranger to war, but this felt different, not a rebellion, not a crusade, but a test. Even those who did not believe in the Emperor's divinity felt the hum of inevitability. Across the galaxy, entire sectors shifted alignment. Armageddon, that cursed world of endless conflict, had become the pivot point of history yet again. Far away in the world that bore his new throne, Vegeta stood upon the parapets of his fortress. The sky above him boiled red and black, heavy with the ghosts of his previous conquests. He felt it before the sensors did the faint tremor in the stars, the gathering of something immense. His eyes closed, and the air around him thickened as his Kai expanded outward, stretching across the atmosphere like the unfurling of a sun. Images brushed against his consciousness. Ships like floating cathedrals, legions clad in gold, blades humming with psychic fire. He opened his eyes and smiled, not with malice but with hunger. Finally, he said, a real challenge. Around him, the Mechanicus priests bowed their heads, mistaking his anticipation for revelation. The manufactorums hummed louder as if the planet itself were preparing for judgment. The Iron Prince's armies assembled in formation, tanks and servitors lined in geometric precision, waiting for commands he hadn't yet given. He looked down at them, these mortals who called him God. They didn't understand that he sought not worship but warth, a pure language of equals. Let them come, he whispered. Let's see if your faith can break my will. In the warp, the chaos gods leaned closer, savoring the tension. Korn laughed until the void shuddered. Blood will sing louder than prayer. Teasing Che smiled his thousand smiles, watching destiny fold into a pattern only he could read. Even the Emperor, seated upon his throne, allowed the faintest ripple of thought to escape a pulse of both dread and curiosity. The fleets advanced, engines burning hymns into the dark. On Armageddon, the winds shifted, carrying the scent of ozone and war. Vegeta's aura erupted skyward, a column of gold and violet piercing the clouds, seen from orbit as a star being born where none should exist. For the briefest moment, both empires, one of gods, one of man, stared into the same horizon, and the galaxy seemed to hold its breath. The storm had gathered. The confrontation was no longer prophecy but inevitability. The void split open with hymns of gold. From orbit, the fleet of the Adeptus Custodes emerged, silent, radiant, perfect. No sirens, no fear. Just disciplined brilliance. Armageddon's upper atmosphere burned under the thrust of thousands of descending vessels, each one shaped like a spear of light. Drop pods tore through the clouds like comets, trailing arcs of oromite fire. The world below trembled. Across the Manufactorum plains, the workers and soldiers of the Iron Prince looked up and mistook them for stars being born. Then came the sound, not thunder, but harmony. The Custodes did not fall with chaos, they descended with purpose. When their pods struck the earth, the impact rang like cathedral bells, sending waves of dust and fire across the horizon. Doors hissed open, and the golden warriors stepped forth. Each custodian was a monument given motion, his armor polished so bright it turned the smoke into reflected halos. Their halberds caught the sun, channeling it into silent flame. No words passed between them, communication was unnecessary. Every movement was exact, deliberate, divine. At their head walked Shield Captain Valen Orsts, his presence eclipsing even the Inferno behind him. His voice, amplified through his armor's vox halo, resonated not as command but as decree. By the Emperor's will, heresy shall kneel. His words were calm, devoid of anger. Around him, Custodes advanced in formation, their steps synchronized like the ticking of the galaxy's last clock. The earth cracked beneath their boots, and even the sky seemed to hesitate, unwilling to interfere with something so absolute. From his fortress of metal and flame, Vegeta watched their descent. The wind rippled through the banners of his new empire, carrying heat and ash up to the parapet where he stood. His cape fluttered, catching the glow of oromite light that now painted the sky. For a long moment, he said nothing. The golden streaks cutting through the atmosphere reminded him of his past, Saiyan pods descending upon conquered worlds, the rush of combat, the hunger for challenge. But this felt different. There was no arrogance in their arrival, no chaos, just perfection. He smirked. So, he murmured, your emperor finally sends gods instead of insects. His aura flickered to life, violet and gold intertwining like opposing suns. The energy cracked the walls around him, bending steel inward. He could feel their presence measured, unwavering, radiant as the sun. Every step they took toward his citadel was deliberate, each heartbeat echoing the same rhythm of devotion. Faith, he said quietly, so sharp it cuts the air. He turned his gaze skyward, eyes narrowing. Let's see if it can cut me. Below, the Custodes formed a gleaming phalanx. Their banners bore no sigils, no words only, the twin-headed eagle wrought in burning gold. The light reflected from their armor turned the battlefield into a living sunrise. The mortals under Vegeta's command fell to their knees, some out of reverence, others from instinctive terror. To them, these were angels sent to reclaim creation. To the Custodes, this was duty, nothing more, nothing less. They advanced without hesitation toward the Iron Prince's fortress, their vox channels filled with low hymns sung in perfect unity. The first custodian touched ground at the base of the citadel's great gate. The steel beneath him softened and melted from the energy radiating off his armor. He drove his halberd into the earth, and the impact echoed across continents. The Emperor sees you, usurper, he declared, voice as clear as the dawn. Through us, his light is judgment. High above, Vegeta's laughter rolled through the clouds. The sound was not mocking it, was exhilarated. He stepped off the parapet, letting gravity claim him for a heartbeat before his aura ignited. The world shook. He landed before them, his boots cracking the glassed soil. Gold met gold, light met light. The Custodes raised their halberds as one, forming a radiant wall. Vegeta's eyes gleamed. You shine bright, he said, his tone low and calm, but you'll need more than light to face me. He raised his hand, and the air itself bent backward. Dust, ash, and flame coiled around him, forming a storm of violet energy. The Custodes tightened formation, shields locking. For a moment, neither side moved. The wind carried molten debris and whispers of prayer. Above them, the oromite ships burned against the heavens like a second sun. And then, the first step forward. The War of Golden Suns had begun. The battlefield was no longer a place, it was a living storm. Every movement of the custards turned the air into light, their auramite armor reflecting fire and sky alike. Each warrior was a golden meteor in motion, a perfect synthesis of faith and violence. Their halberds burned with radiant energy, blades so hot that the ground turned molten beneath their feet. In formation, they moved like a single organism, silent, exact, relentless. When they passed, the rubble of Armageddon's ruins was remade into glass, and every echo of their steps carried the weight of a hymn. Across from them stood Vegeta, surrounded by a vortex of flame and dust. His aura pulsed gold and violet, expanding and contracting like the heartbeat of a newborn star. The wind around him bent backward, screaming against gravity. He smirked as the custards approached, the storm of power in his body rising until the sky split open. Lightning rained upward. Then came the impact. The custards struck first, a wave of coordinated fury. Halberds cut arcs of light that burned through the atmosphere, trailing after images like falling suns. Vegeta met the first blow with a forearm block, the impact erupting into a soundless explosion that erased the air between them. The shockwave flattened entire battalions of Mechanicus servitors and shattered the city's broken towers. Golden light crashed against golden light, and the very laws of matter trembled under the collision. Vegeta pivoted, vanishing from sight. One custodian turned too late. Vegeta appeared behind him, landing a strike that sent the warrior flying half a kilometer through a mountain of steel. But before Vegeta could smirk, a second halberd came down, from above, from nowhere. He twisted away, feeling the blade skim the edge of his aura, slicing the energy clean like silk. The custodian landed, weapon poised, stance flawless. "Impressive," Vegeta said, voice calm, almost respectful. "You don't fight like the rest of them." The warrior's visor gleamed. "We are not the rest," he replied. His next strike came without anger. Mechanical beauty turned deadly. The battle became a rhythm. Energy met geometry. Every custodian's movement answered Vegeta's own, his speed, their precision, his instinct, their coordination. Every blow detonated with enough power to vaporize cities, yet every step remained deliberate, purposeful. To the mortals far below, it was not a fight but a miracle, a celestial event burning above the ashes of a dead world. Vegeta weaved between the halberds, countering not with rage but with artistry. He struck to test, not to kill. Each burst of Kai was a question, and each custodian answered it in kind. Sparks of Kai and sanctified plasma collided mid-air, painting the sky in streaks of white and violet. The battlefield warped under the strain, craters forming where energy met faith. At one moment, three custards moved in perfect unity, forming a triangle of light around him. Their halberds converged, and the air itself screamed. Vegeta raised both hands, catching the combined blast Hidon. For a heartbeat, nothing existed, then the explosion bloomed outward, a flower of brilliance that erased all sound. When the light faded, Vegeta still stood, arms outstretched, smoke curling from his gloves. He looked up, grinning, his hair crackling with electric light. "You're strong," he said softly, "but you're fighting the wrong kind of god." He vanished again. This time, the custards were ready. Halberds met him mid-strike, clashing in a flurry of brilliance that no mortal eye could follow. Time seemed to bend, moments stretching and collapsing as energy tore through dimensions. The pressure melted ground into rivers of glass. The sun itself seemed dimmer. When they finally broke apart, the silence that followed was almost holy. The custards held formation, their armor cracked, steam rising from ruptured seals. Vegeta floated a few meters above the ground, breathing heavily, blood trickling down his temple, not from weakness, but from joy. One custodian stepped forward, his voice low, his words trembling not with exhaustion but revelation. "You fight not as heretics," he said, "but as reflection." The words struck deeper than any weapon. Vegeta's grin softened. For a long moment he said nothing. Around them, fires raged, but the battle had already ended in spirit. The two forces' discipline and pride had met and recognized themselves in one another. Vegeta finally spoke, voice quieter than the wind. "Then maybe your emperor isn't the only one who understands what perfection costs." The custodian nodded once, not submission, not agreement, but acknowledgement. Then, as if bound by some silent accord, both sides withdrew. The custards stepped back into formation, retreating toward their landing zone without turning their backs. Vegeta descended to the cracked earth, folding his arms, watching them go. The air still shimmered from the clash, a faint golden haze lingering like the memory of divinity. As the last Auramite figure vanished into the smoke, Vegeta exhaled. The smirk returned, softer this time. Perfection, he murmured, isn't given by gods. It's earned one battle at a time. Above him, the sky burned with twin colors, violet and gold. The storm had passed, but its echo would resound across galaxies. Deep beneath the crust of terror, where the light of no sun had touched for 10,000 years, the golden throne stirred. The endless drones of machinery, the life support of a god, fell into rhythm, as if the entire palace were holding its breath. The Astronomicon flared, blinding half the Imperium's psychers in an instant. Within that light, thought became thunder. The Emperor had opened his eyes again. He saw the afterimage of the battle on Armageddon. Golden armor cracked and gleaming, a Saiyan standing amid the ruins with the calm of a king. The Emperor studied him through the warp, through the folds of time and soul. There was no corruption in this being's essence. No demon clawed at his will. No whisper of chaos lived in his aura. He was pure, terribly, definitely pure. The realization unsettled even the divine. A god who kneels to none, the Emperor thought, and yet fights with discipline that mirrors my own. The thought rippled outward. Across the throne room, thousands of robed attendants collapsed as psychic energy flooded their minds. The custards guarding the sanctum felt the pulse before it arrived, their weapons vibrating in resonance with his command. The Emperor's voice did not speak in words. It arrived as gravity, a command written into the marrow of existence. Bring him to me. The phrase reverberated through every custodian's mind simultaneously, clear and absolute. No interpretation, no question. Where mortals would hear madness, they heard order. Across the fleet above Armageddon, the command echoed in their souls like the toll of a celestial bell. The custards straightened, their exhaustion erased. Shield Captain Valen lowered his halberd, golden light dancing over the weapon's edge. The Emperor calls, he said simply. Far from terror, within the warp's shifting tides, the gods of chaos recoiled. The golden light seared through their realm like a blade. Khorne roared, splitting continents of blood. Tzinche writhed as plans unraveled. Slaanesh screamed in delight and fury, while Nurgle's laughter choked into silence. He would summon the mortal, Tzinche hissed. He would invite him into his light. But even they, in their infinite pride, dared not intercede directly. The Emperor's will was a law older than their spite. On Armageddon, Vegeta stood alone amid the aftermath, the wind carrying ashes like snow. His aura had faded to a faint shimmer, but his eyes still burned with defiance. And then, he felt it, a presence unlike any he had ever known. It was not an attack, not a probe, but a summons. It pressed against his consciousness, neither demanding nor pleading. A command that did not insult. A challenge wrapped in invitation. He closed his eyes, the faintest smile forming. So, he said softly, the god himself finally wants a word. Across the galaxy, destinies shifted course. Battles paused. Choirs fell silent. The Imperium and the Warp alike waited for what would come next, not conquest, not destruction, but audience. The Emperor had spoken. The Mechanicus dreadnought Omophagy Turnham drifted through the rift between galaxies, its colossal engines burning in steady rhythm, the heartbeat of a god repurposed for a mortal's journey. Once a sanctum of machine worship, it now served a single traveler who neither prayed nor obeyed. Vegeta stood on the observation deck, arms folded, gazing into the void. The warp flared outside the reinforced glass like a wounded aurora, currents of madness twisting in impossible hues. Every color spoke of a temptation, every shimmer a promise. Yet within that chaos, he found stillness. No stars could be seen here, only distortion. Rivers of thought flowing through an ocean of memory. Faces appeared in the haze, long-dead psychers, forgotten soldiers, saints devoured by their own faith. They drifted through the mist like embers from a dying fire, whispering in voices that were not sound but sorrow. Join us, they said, for all strength ends here. Vegeta's reflection met theirs, and the gold in his eyes flared once. The whispers fell silent. He had been here before, in spirit, this realm where thought bends into weaponry, where gods drink the fears of the living. It reminded him of the hyperbolic time chamber, but stretched to eternity and stripped of purpose. Each second could be an age. He closed his eyes, feeling the warp press against his mind like heat against metal. The temptation was not power, he had already mastered that. It was understanding. The warp promised to show him the shape of infinity if only he surrendered his pride. He smiled faintly. I don't kneel to infinity either. Outside the viewport, the currents thickened. Shadows congealed into something alive. Demons clawed at the ship's hull, their forms flickering between beauty and nightmare. One took the shape of a woman draped in starlight, her voice smooth as the edge of a blade. "You are wasted among mortals," she purred. "Come, rule beside us. The galaxy would burn your name into its bones." Her hand pressed against the glass from the other side, her eyes 2 galaxies spinning in worship. Vegeta looked at her for a long moment, expression unreadable. "You talk too much," he said, and raised a finger. His aura pulsed once. The dreadnought's hull blazed with violet light, and the apparition dissolved into dust. The warp screamed, folding in on itself. The silence that followed was deeper than before. Days or eternities passed. Time here was meaningless. The ship's engines whispered machine prayers in binary, and somewhere deep in its belly, the tech priests who had survived the voyage knelt in awe, whispering the new litany they had composed for their strange, quiet god. He walks without sound, and the warp bends. In that silence, Vegeta meditated, no longer seeking power, no longer craving battle. His aura, once violent and proud, had changed. It burned steady and quiet, like the core of a dying sun refusing to extinguish. In stillness, he began to understand something the Emperor had spoken without words. That strength without restraint is destruction, and restraint without strength is death. To hold both was the burden of creation. Occasionally, fragments of the mortal universe leaked into his solitude, a Mechanicus canticle from the ship's voxnet, a prayer from some distant system carried through the warp like static. "O Emperor, preserve us." The words no longer irritated him. They reminded him of how fragile faith was and how powerful belief could be when unshackled from fear. He looked into the void again, watching the auroras twist like veins of fire in the dark. Somewhere beyond that horizon, the golden throne waited. He felt it now, not as pressure, not as command, but as an invitation. A presence vast, patient, waiting for him to arrive, not as subject, but as equal. Vegeta breathed deeply, the sound echoing in the empty chamber. "So this is what silence feels like," he murmured. "It's heavier than war." He allowed himself a rare smile. Good. The warp around him flickered, the ship slipping through the final currents toward Terra's psychic light. As the dreadnought emerged into real space, its hull trailing tendrils of fire and dream, Vegeta opened his eyes. His aura brightened once more, not furious, not wild, but centered. The flame had learned discipline. For the first time in his life, he wasn't chasing a fight. He was answering one. The dreadnought drifted to a halt beside a dead moon, a sphere of obsidian stone orbiting nothing but emptiness. It had no name, no light, no atmosphere. The Mechanicus maps called it 017, a world avoided even by the warp's madness. But as the ship's engines dimmed, Vegeta felt it immediately, a pulse beneath the silence, faint but deliberate. He stood on the bridge, gaze fixed on the black surface below. "It's calling," he murmured. The tech priests dared not speak. Without waiting for confirmation, he stepped from the ship, letting his aura bear him through the void. The moon's gravity was weak, but its presence was overwhelming. Every inch of its surface was carved with cracks that glowed faint violet, like veins of energy stitched through stone. When Vegeta landed, the ground responded, pulsing once, then splitting open into a mirror of molten glass. From that reflection rose a figure he knew too well. Beerus, the god of destruction, floated above the crater, his form exact, purple skin gleaming under phantom light, gold bands reflecting infinity. His eyes burned with that same lazy cruelty Vegeta had once feared. "You again," the illusion said, voice dripping with amusement. "You've come far, Prince, but still chained to arrogance. I warned you. Power without purpose ends in ash." Vegeta didn't flinch. "You're not him." The mirage smiled. "No, I'm better. I'm everything you've wanted to be. Free. Worshipped. Eternal." His aura ignited, a sea of purple and black rippling across the moon's surface. "Serve chaos," he whispered, "and surpass even gods. Rule not as man, not as Saiyan, but as force. The warp will kneel." The air cracked apart as Vegeta's laughter echoed through the void. It wasn't mockery, it was pure, unrestrained amusement. "You think I need the warp to surpass gods?" He took a single step forward, his boots carving molten footprints in the rock. "I already did." The mirage struck. Space folded as the false Beerus vanished and reappeared mid-swing, his clawed hand moving faster than thought. The blow landed, or would have, had Vegeta not caught it. The shockwave erupted across the moon, blasting entire mountains into orbit. The echo of destruction rippled through the void, visible from light years away. But Vegeta didn't stagger. His grip tightened. "You're my shadow," he said calmly, "and I've outgrown you." They fought in silence, each impact rewriting gravity, each clash collapsing reality for fractions of seconds. The illusion mirrored his every move, perfect counters, perfect precision, like facing the sum of every mistake he had ever made. For every strike he landed, the reflection landed one in return. The battle became cyclical, rage for rage, pride for pride, two suns colliding without end. Yet something had changed. The old Vegeta would have fought until one lay broken. This Vegeta watched, analyzed. Every blow from his opponent was his own fury reflected back. Every insult was a memory of the man who once knelt, once begged, once defined worth by destruction. As their energies collided in one final explosion, Vegeta stopped. The illusion lunged. He didn't move. The blast washed over him, burning light consuming everything. When it cleared, he was still standing, calm, unscathed. The false Beerus stared, disbelieving. "You yield." Vegeta's smirk softened. "No," he said, "I accept." For the first time, the mirage faltered. Its form flickered, the arrogance in its eyes fading into something like relief. The god's image bowed its head, and then it shattered, not as dust, but as light. The moon's surface glowed, the cracks closing into a perfect circle. Above him, the stars shifted, aligning in a pattern unseen by mortal astronomers, a crown of fire stretching across the heavens. Vegeta exhaled slowly. The reflection had not been an enemy. It had been his last test, the moment where pride stopped being a cage and became conviction. He looked up at the cosmic crown, faintly smiling. "To conquer the universe was easy," he said. "To conquer myself, that took longer." The warp fell utterly silent, its voices retreating like waves drawn back into the deep. Even the demons dared not speak. The Saiyan Prince stood alone on the lifeless moon, his aura no longer violent or defiant, but regal, a calm sun in eternal night. When he returned to the dreadnought, the tech priests fell to their knees as the ship's systems rebooted, their screens flooded with a single sigil. A crown of intertwined gold and violet lines, the mark that now burned faintly upon Vegeta's chestplate. He glanced at it once, expression unreadable, then turned toward the viewport. Ahead lay Terra, gleaming through the void like a promise. He had passed his final trial. The next would not be of battle, but of truth. The void parted like a curtain of gold and shadow, revealing the Sol system in all its sacred immensity. Where most saw stars, Vegeta saw sentinels, colossal fortresses orbiting worlds, their surfaces alive with light and devotion. Cathedrals the size of continents floated between planets, each one carved with the Emperor's sigil, each one radiating hymns that vibrated through space itself. As the omniphage Eternum approached, the ship's hull sang with the resonance of psychic choirs. Even the void seemed to hum in reverence. Ahead lay Terra, the throne world, heart of the Imperium, and the resting place of the last true god of mankind. Its surface gleamed like molten bronze beneath the eternal storms of its atmosphere. From orbit, golden lightning traced veins across the planet's skin, illuminating the scars of millennia of worship and war. The astronomy can blazed above it, not as a beacon but as a crown, the light that had guided humanity for 10,000 years. And now, that light pulsed in recognition of something new drawing near. Within the dreadnought's command deck, the tech priests fell silent, their augurs overwhelmed by psionic interference. Vox channels filled with hymnal static, voices, 1,000 strong, chanting in synchronization. Gloria Imperata, Lux Solis Eternum. The custard's fleets encircled Terra adjusted formation, each vessel gliding aside with mathematical grace to create a corridor of approach. There was no aggression, no demand for surrender. Only solemn precision, the kind reserved for ceremony, not war. Vegeta stood at the viewport, arms folded, watching the golden planet grow larger. His reflection shone faintly against the glass, a warrior no longer bound by fury yet not emptied by peace. His aura, once a storm, now shimmered like sunlight on calm water. For the first time, he understood what he had become, not conqueror, not savior, but equilibrium. "So," he murmured, "this is where the gods hide their thrones." Below, on the palace steps that stretch for miles, the custards assembled in perfect silence. Lines of auramite armor caught the sun, turning the horizon itself into a mirror of gold. The Grand Master of the Custodian Guard, Valen Orsts, looked to the heavens. His vox voice carried across the world, "He comes." The Emperor's psychic presence stirred again, vast and quiet as sunrise. Across the galaxy, psychers dropped to their knees as his consciousness expanded. For a brief, impossible instant, even the warp stilled. A whisper crossed the gulf between light and soul, a voice neither spoken nor heard, yet undeniable. "Welcome, Prince of another sun." The words struck not as command but as acknowledgement, one sovereign greeting another. Vegeta closed his eyes, and a faint, knowing smile touched his lips. The dreadnought's engines dimmed. Golden light enveloped everything. The camera drew close to his face, calm, resolute, immortal. The fires of countless wars reflected in his eyes, but their heat no longer burned. Only understanding remained. As the ship descended into Terra's light, the choir's psalms reached their crescendo. The frame dissolved into brilliance, white and endless. When two suns meet, a universe trembles. The gates of the Sanctum Imperialis opened not with sound, but with consequence. The sheer weight of their movement rippled through reality, as if history itself had paused to bear witness. Beyond them lay a corridor that defied scale, an expanse of marble, gold, and shadow stretching farther than perception. The air was thick with incense and memory. Every step Vegeta took resounded like thunder restrained, the echo swallowed by cathedral walls carved with the faces of 1,000,000 saints. Along either side stood the custard, silent, immovable, perfect. Their halberds gleamed beneath the eternal light of Terra's sun, refracting it into 1,000 fractured halos. None moved, none breathed. To the mortal eye, they could have been statues. But to Vegeta, they were pressure, the kind of stillness that could crush worlds if it wished. He met their invisible gaze without hesitation, his aura steady, neither challenge nor submission. His boots left faint scorch marks on the polished floor, a reminder that he was no supplicant. He advanced through the corridor, past murals depicting 10,000 years of faith and suffering, wars fought in the Emperor's name, empires raised and raised by devotion. He saw humanity's triumph and tragedy immortalized in paint and blood. And yet, for all their splendor, the images felt hollow. They spoke not of peace, but of endurance. "So this is eternity," he murmured under his breath. "Not living forever, just refusing to die." As he reached the heart of the sanctum, the air changed. The golden light deepened, becoming tangible, a gravity of presence that settled upon him like the gaze of a star. The chamber beyond the final arch was vast, yet intimate, lit by fire that did not burn and shadows that did not yield. At its center rose the golden throne, a monolith of impossible architecture, equal parts machinery and divinity. Cables thicker than ships coiled upward into the void above, feeding power into the husk of eternity. Upon it sat the Emperor of mankind. His body was both corpse and cosmos, radiant and ruined, bound in gold that shimmered between matter and meaning. His eyes were closed, but the air trembled as if the act of his existence sustained the fabric of the room. His soul, vast beyond comprehension, bled across dimensions, each flicker of his essence birthing light in worlds unseen. And yet, within that infinite magnitude, there was still a man, weary, patient, waiting. Vegeta stepped forward until he stood at the foot of the dais. For a heartbeat, neither being moved. The custards behind him faded from relevance, their divine presence reduced to background noise. In this space, there were only two wills, suns orbiting the same truth. The Emperor's eyes opened. They were not eyes, but horizons, twin stars containing millennia of memory, sacrifice, and faith. The chamber darkened beneath their glow. Vegeta's own aura flickered in answer, not in defiance but in resonance. For the first time since crossing into this universe, he felt the full measure of something equal to himself. Their first exchange was wordless. The Emperor's thoughts brushed his mind like sunlight against armor, immense, measured, not invasive. "You have come far, Prince of another sun." The message was neither welcome nor challenging. It was recognition. Vegeta's reply was not spoken, but lived, a flare of energy that painted the chamber violet and gold. It was pride made visible, but no longer tainted by vanity. "I didn't come to kneel," his expression said, "but to understand." The Emperor's gaze softened, though his form did not move. The silence between them deepened, the kind of silence that holds creation still. The air crackled with psionic resonance as their auras met, one born of endless discipline, the other of unbreakable will. Marble trembled. The custards lowered their heads, not from fear, but reverence. For a moment, even time hesitated. In that stillness, two empires looked into each other's reflection. One ruled through faith, the other through strength. Both had built their worlds from ruin. Both carried eternity on their shoulders. And in that fragile equilibrium, the galaxy itself seemed to exhale, not in peace, but in understanding. The chamber trembled as their silence broke. Vegeta's voice was steady, low, like the rumble before thunder. "You rule through obedience," he said, his words cutting through the sanctum's golden air. "Through fear dressed as faith. You call that strength." The Emperor did not answer immediately. His eyes glowed brighter, and the light bled into the marble floor like molten dawn. When he finally spoke, his tone was neither anger nor command. It was the sound of history itself. "Strength without purpose," he said, "is only destruction that does not yet know its name." The air between them ignited. Words became energy, literal flame and light, each syllable clashing like dueling blades. The marble beneath Vegeta's feet cracked, threads of violet energy snaking outward. Above them, the Emperor's voice rippled through the hall, visible as waves of gold. Their dialogue was no longer mere conversation, it was communion, will be made manifest, though transmuted into fire. Vegeta took a step forward, aura pulsing in answer. "Purpose? I've fought gods who hid behind that word. They called slaughter holy, weakness divine. You bind your people in chains of devotion and call it unity." The Emperor's radiance deepened, his presence expanding until the very air bowed. "And you," he replied, "seek freedom, yet carry nothing but your own reflection. You destroy to prove you exist, to silence doubt. But when the echoes fade, what remains?" For a heartbeat, the hall was storming and silent all at once. Light cascaded down from the throne like solar wind. Vegeta's Kai rose to meet it, a fountain of molten violet splitting the air. The two forces collided, not violently but symphonically, light and flame weaving into a tapestry of memory. Around them, the walls became vision. The Emperor's words conjured images of humanity's endless struggle, crusades across dying worlds, billions kneeling beneath banners of light, soldiers dying with his name on their lips. The gold shimmered with sorrow rather than pride. "I did not want to rule," he said. "I wanted to preserve what little could survive the dark. But mercy without order is extinction." Vegeta's energy responded with its own truth, visions of his past flashing around them like embers. Frieza's laughter, Beerus's disinterest, the endless pursuit of worth. "And order without freedom," he countered, "is just another kind of death." His aura flared brighter, splitting into streams of energy that traced constellations across the ceiling. The stars themselves seemed to listen. "You built an empire to protect your people, but you caged them to do it. I fought gods to free myself from that cage. Maybe the only difference between us," he paused, smirking faintly, ... is that I won." The Emperor's gaze softened. "No," he said quietly. "You simply haven't lived long enough to lose." The words struck harder than any blow. The storm stilled, and for a moment there was only the hum of eternity. Vegeta's expression changed, not in defeat, but in recognition. "You envy me," he said. The Emperor inclined his head, a fraction. "And you pity me," he replied. Their lights flared again, not in anger but in understanding. Two forces, discipline and defiance, merged, filling the hall with impossible brilliance. The custards outside the chamber felt it as pressure, as prayer. For a brief instant, it seemed as if the galaxy itself might split under the strain of their shared awareness. Then, without warning, both energies collapsed inward. A single pulse of white light spread outward, gentle yet infinite. The marble stopped trembling. The gold stopped burning. Silence returned, soft as breath. Vegeta stood at the base of the throne, the air still humming faintly around him. The Emperor's eyes had dimmed, their light retreating to something almost human. "You fight with precision," he said, "not cruelty. And you rule with conviction," Vegeta replied, "not arrogance." Their gazes met again. Two horizons aligned. The tension that had filled the room dissolved, replaced by quiet acknowledgement. There would be no victory here, only reflection. The Emperor leaned back against his throne, the faintest ghost of weariness crossing his divine features. "If I were free," he said, "I might have walked your path." Vegeta smiled, not his smirk of battle but something purer, stripped of ego. "And if I had your burden," he answered, "maybe I'd have built your empire. The light between them shimmered once more, gold and violet intertwining, each recognizing itself within the other. The galaxy outside seemed to hold its breath, and for the first time in 10,000 years, the throne did not feel lonely. The light within the chamber shifted, not brighter, not dimmer, but purer. Every flicker of flame along the golden walls stood still, as if the universe itself were holding its breath. The silence was not empty, it was sacred, vibrating with meaning too vast for words. The Emperor raised one hand, slow and deliberate, his movements echoing through dimensions. Streams of gold unraveled from his palm, weaving into the air like strands of sunlight caught in a storm. His voice resonated without sound, a thought that carried through matter and soul alike. Then let there be balance, not rule. Vegeta stepped forward, his expression unreadable. His aura shimmered in muted violet, neither aggression nor restraint, simply presence. When he lifted his hand, the glow that met the Emperor's radiance was not defiant, but equal. Energy collided softly at first, then intertwined, gold and violet spiraling together into a pillar of unity that rose from the marble floor to the vaulted heavens above. The hall itself seemed to inhale. Every custodian dropped to one knee. Across Terra, astropaths screamed as visions of twin suns blazed in their minds, two flames orbiting one another, neither consuming nor yielding. The warp recoiled, its sea of madness thrashing against unseen shores. From the immaterium came a collective cry, the shriek of gods denied their chaos. Khorne's rage echoed through dead worlds. Tezinchi's patterns dissolved. Even Slanesh faltered, beauty humbled by symmetry. Still, within that maelstrom, the two lights stood firm. The Emperor's psychic essence stretched farther, enveloping the Scion's energy. Yet it did not bind it harmonized. "You are beyond my dominion," he said aloud now, his voice both thunder and mercy. "But this galaxy, it bleeds. Humanity cannot endure another god. It needs a guardian without a throne, a strength unfettered by creed. Will you bear that burden?" Vegeta's eyes burned like twin stars. "Not as a servant," he replied, "but as balance." The Emperor inclined his head, a gesture so subtle, yet cosmic in consequence. The energy between them condensed into a single flare, then burst outward, flooding the chamber with warmth instead of heat. For the first time in 10 millennia, the light of terror expanded, touching orbit, igniting the void in a golden dawn visible from Mars to Pluto. The choirs of the Astronomicon sang unbidden, their psalms no longer screams of strain but harmony. Vegeta lowered his hand. The glow faded, leaving only stillness, a fragile peace written in light. "Then it settled," he said quietly. "Two suns, each burning its own sky." The Emperor's expression softened. "Until the dark returns." Outside, in the warp's infinite depths, something stirred. The Chaos Gods, wounded and enraged, began to conspire anew, their hatred focusing upon this new equilibrium. But for now, in the heart of the throne world, peace reigned, a moment brief as breath, yet eternal in meaning. In the endless ocean of the warp, something ancient began to scream. It started as a whisper, a fracture of thought carried on tides of madness. Then it spread. Across the immaterium's shifting expanse, the Chaos Gods stirred in unison, their dominions trembling as realization took form. The Pact of Suns, that fragile unity between mortal and divine, had wounded them in a way no war ever had. For the first time in eternity, order had entered the warp, and the warp could not abide it. Khorne roared first, his anger boiling galaxies of blood into vapor. Every droplet became a blade, slicing through the void as he bellowed, "Balance mocks battle. Let all harmony burn." From the domain of decay, Nurgle's laughter turned hollow, the sweetness of rot replaced with bitterness. "Hope infects too quickly," he croaked. "Let despair consume what light remains." Tezinche followed, his 1,000 eyes flickering open, each filled with burning envy. "They have stolen the script," he hissed. "If balance exists, then chaos has purpose, and that I will not allow." Last came Slanesh, whose song wavered into distortion, pleasure twisting into agony. "Two suns share light," the god purred. "Then I will birth the eclipse." Their hatred collided, 4 infinities clashing in perfect synchronization. For eons uncounted, they had despised each other more than any foe. Yet now, in their shared fury, a single will emerged. The warp screamed again, louder, shaking even the material realm. The galaxies themselves flinched, stars dimmed as psychic pressure crushed light into silence. In the warp's black heart, the four divine powers spiraled inward, merging into a vortex of unmaking. The storm had no color, no form, only hunger. From its center, an outline began to emerge, shifting between shapes, a titan of flame, a serpent of thought, a chorus of a billion faces. Every scream, every whisper, every forbidden prayer from every world echoed here, feeding it. A name rose from the chaos, not spoken but felt: the Abyssal God. Its voice was not one but thousands, layered in perfect discord. Balance must die. The warp convulsed. Its seas rose and folded into themselves. Warp storms exploded across the galaxy, devouring fleets, tearing apart planets. The Eye of Terror expanded, swallowing systems whole. Even the astronomy can, the Emperor's eternal flame, flickered like a candle in the wind. Demons poured into reality, no longer divided by allegiance. Brass merged with silk, plague with flame, lies with lust. The legions of chaos became one body, a writhing, immortal swarm. On distant battlefronts, the Imperial Navy fought ghosts that bled through the void. Astropaths burst into flame mid-message. The Mechanicus recorded readings that defied mathematics. Reality destabilizing, one man stammered before turning to ash. Worlds that had prayed for salvation now prayed for silence. And upon Terra, deep within the sanctum of the throne, the Emperor felt the first shudder of the coming storm. The throne itself moaned, its conduits straining under psychic pressure. The custards dropped to one knee, the air filling with hymns of warning. Through the golden haze of the chamber, Vegeta's eyes snapped open. The faint smirk returned, sharp, dangerous, alive. "So that's their answer," he said, his voice echoing through the sanctum. "They can't kill gods alone, so they made a bigger one." The Emperor's gaze turned toward him, his tone grave, not surprised. "They have done what even I feared. They've abandoned rivalry for purpose." "Then we give them one," Vegeta replied, his aura already crackling. "If they want war, let's show them what balance really means." Beyond the palace walls, the skies above Terra split open. The stars wept gold and blood. Across the galaxy, prophets screamed of the coming dark, of a shadow that devours both sin and virtue alike. The warp bled into reality, and every soul, mortal, divine, and damned, felt the same truth. The final war was no longer between faith and fury. It was between creation and itself. The universe broke open. There was no sky anymore, only fracture. Space itself had turned to glass, splintering under the pressure of a war too vast for reality to contain. The stars screamed as they fell, dragged from their orbits like dying embers. Oceans of light and darkness collided, folding galaxies into spirals of unending fire. In the midst of it all, two figures rose from the storm, one wreathed in violet gold flame, the other crowned in radiance older than creation. The Emperor of mankind and Vegeta, Prince of all Saiyans, stood side by side. The Abyssal God loomed before them, vast and formless, its body made of thought, emotion, and sin. Within its storming mass, faces flickered, Korn's jaw of iron, Tzinch's eyes of flame, Slanesh's mouth of light, Nurgle's endless grin. Every word it spoke birthed 1,000 nightmares, every movement unmade 1,000 suns. "Balance must die," it thundered, its voice echoing through the veins of existence. The Emperor extended his hand, and psychic light erupted outward, not fire, but creation itself, thought made tangible. His mind forged suns and hurled them like weapons, each one exploding into constellations that seared through the entity's shadow. The abyss recoiled, reality bending under its howl. But before it could reform, Vegeta moved. He was emotion incarnate. A streak of violet and gold carved through the storm, each striking an event horizon. His fist struck faster than time could count, each blow detonating with the sound of collapsing worlds. Kai blasts flared like novas, their heat carving silhouettes into the void. He darted past a tendril of darkness and slammed his palms together, roaring, final flash. The beam ripped through eternity. For a moment there was silence, the kind of silence that comes when the impossible has been seen. Then the abyss shrieked, its endless form burning white-hot, chunks of chaos peeling away like dying scales. But victory did not last. The god's body reformed, its wounds knitting from the hatred of every living soul. Every scream, every fear across the galaxy fed it. Warp storms flared anew, human prayers twisted into fuel for damnation. The Emperor grimaced. his aura flickering. "It feeds on feeling," he said. "Every thought strengthens it." Vegeta's reply was a growl of defiance. "Then I'll burn everything that feels weak." He clenched his fists, his aura pulsing brighter than before, gold deepening to blinding white, threaded with traces of violet flame. His hair lifted higher, sparks bending gravity itself. The light from his body grew unbearable, stretching across the battlefield like dawn-consuming night. This was not Super Saiyan Blue. It was beyond form, beyond transformation, Saiyan Ascendant, power forged not in rage, but in purpose. "I fight for existence," he roared, and the universe answered. Every living soul felt it, from hive workers on Terra to dying Eldar seers, from orcs bellowing across the void to newborn children taking their first breaths. His voice pierced the warp, cutting through despair like a blade through fog. The abyss staggered. For the first time, the chaos entity faltered, its unity fracturing under the weight of pure conviction. The Emperor seized the opening. His psychic aura blazed anew, forming wings of burning light. "Then fight with me," he commanded. Together, they struck, god and warrior, order and will. Their combined power was unthinkable. Every impact birthed galaxies, every clash annihilated them again. Light and flame wove through shadow in a dance of creation and destruction. From orbit, the custards watched in silence, awestruck as Terra's sky became a tapestry of divine war. Auroras of violet and gold streaking across the heavens, lightning arcs shaping holy symbols in the clouds. Below, humanity knelt in unity, their prayers merging into one voice. "Emperor protect!" they cried, though none could hear the words. Across the warp, that single plea transformed, not into faith, but fuel. The Emperor's eyes flared, his power magnified by the love and fear of trillions. "You see," he shouted over the roar of the cosmos. "Even weakness can hold strength when united." Vegeta smirked. "Then let's finish this, before your followers run out of prayers." The abyss lunged, its shadow swallowing them whole. Inside its heart, there was nothing, no color, no sound, no sense, only despair. Yet even here, light survived. The Emperor's radiance glowed like a distant sun, and Vegeta's flame burned beside it, stubborn and steady. They moved in harmony, a single motion, two wills. The Emperor channeled his energy into Vegeta, shaping it into a weapon. The Saiyan focused it, his palms glowing with impossible brightness. The power they forged together transcended both Kai and psychic force. It was the essence of balance itself. "Final order!" they roared in unison. The explosion tore through every plane of existence. The abyssal god screamed, its voice fracturing into countless dying echoes. Reality folded, twisted, then reassembled. The warp convulsed and collapsed inward, sealing its rift. When the light faded, the void was silent again. Only the faint shimmer of stars remained, reborn, fragile, but free. The Emperor hovered in the aftermath, his armor cracked, his aura dimmed but unbroken. Beside him floated Vegeta, chest heaving, a faint grin still on his face. "Not bad," he said quietly. The Emperor's lips curved in the faintest smile. For a mortal, they turned toward the faint blue glow of Terra, home, fragile and waiting. Behind them, the ashes of the abyss drifted into the dark, falling like golden dust upon the new dawn. Two suns burned still, and the galaxy lived. The light faded slowly, like dawn hesitating before returning to a wounded world. The battlefield that had once spanned eternity was gone. The warp, once an ocean of madness, now lay still, its storms exhausted, its voices silenced. Fragments of the abyss drifted through the void like dust motes suspended in amber, dissolving into colorless light. Across the galaxy, the chaos subsided. Rifts sealed, skies cleared, and for the first time in millennia, the astronomy can burned steady and unshaken. Terra's golden glow returned, softer, purer, alive. In the hollow quiet above the throne world, two figures hovered amid the debris of their own divinity. The Emperor, drained yet radiant, knelt upon invisible air, his armor fractured and molten at the seams. Each breath released a soft gleam of gold, the light of creation leaking through wounds that no mortal could comprehend. Yet upon his lips was something rare, the faint shadow of a smile. Before him stood Vegeta, silent. The fire around him had dimmed to a gentle shimmer, the violet and gold blending into calm starlight. His gaze wandered through the void, to the faint shimmer of distant worlds, to the ashes of war turned into peace. The defiance that had once fueled him was gone, replaced by something quieter, heavier. "We won," he said, his voice echoing in the vastness, almost reverent. "But who will remember?" The Emperor looked up, his eyes soft as suns at rest. "The stars will," he answered, "and that is enough." For a moment, neither spoke. The silence between them carried more weight than words, the shared understanding of what they had saved and what they had lost to do it. Below them, Terra shimmered like a jewel in the dark. Across its surface, humanity stirred, priests in awe, soldiers in prayer, children opening their eyes to a light they thought was gone forever. The Custards stood once more at the palace gates, their golden armor gleaming in quiet triumph. The throne glowed brighter than it had in ages, its pulse matching the heartbeat of the world itself. Vegeta turned at last, his cape catching the starlight. "Keep your empire," he said, half a grin on his face. "I've got a universe to see." The Emperor inclined his head. "Then go, Prince of Suns. The balance holds for now." With a single motion, Vegeta rose, vanishing into the horizon, leaving behind a faint trail of gold and violet fire. The light lingered for a long time before fading into the dark, and when it was gone, only stillness remained, vast, eternal, and, for once, at peace. The bells of Terra rang for the first time in 10,000 years. Their sound was deep and resonant, forged from the same metal as the Emperor's armor, each toll echoing across the marble canyons of the Imperial Palace. The great cathedrals that had once known only hymns to the Emperor now sang a new refrain, softer, humbler, dangerous. In their choirs, one name had joined the other: Gloria Imperator, Gloria Solis Ferrum, glory to the Emperor, glory to the Iron Sun. From the high spires of Terra to the soot-choked manufactorums of Mars, the legend had spread. It began as whispers, tales carried by soldiers who swore they had seen a second sun rise during the final battle against the Abyss. Those who had witnessed the golden and violet light spoke of it not as a weapon, but as a miracle. The story changed as it traveled, shifting like scripture through generations. By the time it reached the ecclesiastical archives, Vegeta was no longer a warrior from another universe. He had become something else, the Emperor's silent hand, the heretic who fought beside him to save all of creation. In the Cathedral of Dual Light, 1,000 candles burned before twin statues. On one side, the Emperor sat upon his throne, haloed in gold. On the other, a new figure had been sculpted, standing tall, cloak cast in motion, one fist clenched at his side, the other open toward the stars. His hair, carved in jagged flame, reached toward the ceiling like frozen fire. Beneath his feet, the inscription read, "The Prince Who Defied Chaos." Pilgrims knelt before both statues now. Some prayed to one, some to both, and none could quite tell where devotion ended and blasphemy began. The ecclesiarchy was divided. The old priests called it heresy, the dilution of the Emperor's divine supremacy. But others whispered that perhaps this duality was divine will itself. "Two suns burn brighter than one," said Cardinal Vorton, whose sermons filled the Basilica of the Iron Dawn. His voice carried through Vox and Scripture alike. Did not the Emperor himself allow this being to live? Did he not call him brother in battle? Then who are we to silence his choice? In the Forge Worlds, the cult Mechanicus embraced the myth with fervor. To them, Vegeta was not heretic but perfection, a fusion of biological mastery and energetic harmony. Machine priests painted the iron crown upon their robes beside the double-headed Aquila. In their canticles, they sang of the warrior of equilibrium whose Kai harmonized with the machine spirit, who brought unity between man and mechanism. Some claimed his energy still lingered in the void, detectable as faint pulses near the Sol system, proof that the Iron Sun still watched from beyond. Art followed faith. Frescoes appeared across the Segmentum Solar, the Emperor and the Iron Sun standing side by side, hands raised toward the heavens, holding back a sea of shadow. Poets wrote of his defiance turned divine, his pride reinterpreted as purpose. What had once been arrogance was now scripture, the flame of individual will, a parable recited in academies to inspire obedience through strength rather than fear. But not all were at peace. The Ordo Hereticus launched quiet purges, burning texts that equated the two deities as equals. To them, duality was corruption, the seed of rebellion that could fracture faith once more. In their hidden chambers, they debated whether to erase all memory of the Saiyan entirely. Yet every attempt failed. The myth had already taken root where no fire could reach, in the hearts of common men. On countless worlds, miners whispered prayers before the shift. Iron Sun, guide my hands. Soldiers carved his sigil onto armor plates beside the Aquila. Children born under violet dawns were named Vegeta in his honor. The Imperium, without realizing it, had absorbed him not as an intruder but as balance. And in the deepest vaults of the imperial palace, where the air itself trembled with holiness, one custodian stood watch before a new mural. It depicted two suns orbiting the same world, their light blending into one eternal glow. He bowed his head, murmuring softly, "Even gods are rewritten by history." Above, unseen yet felt, the throne pulsed once, as if in agreement. The golden throne hummed softly, a sound older than memory, deeper than language. Beneath the endless machinery that sustained him, the Emperor of mankind dreamed. It was not the fevered dreaming of mortals but something vaster, a slow unfolding of eternity, where centuries drifted by as thoughts and eons passed in the space between breaths. His consciousness stretched across light years, touching every whisper of prayer that reached terror. Yet amid the chorus of devotion, one echo rose above all others, a name that was not his own, the Iron Sun. He saw it, faint, radiant, free. A warrior walking through galaxies no longer bound by law, creed, or throne. A solitary figure whose fire carried neither reverence nor rebellion, only purpose. Vegeta moved through nebulae like a comet, unshackled by divinity, untouched by the worship that now cloaked his name. Planets whispered legends of him, but he never answered. He simply existed, ungoverned, unbroken. The Emperor's gaze followed, his psychic vision tracing the path of the Saiyan's flame across the void. Every movement stirred memories long buried, of a younger age, when he himself had walked among men not as God, but as guide. He remembered laughter that had once echoed through humanity's dawn, before the burden of the Empire crushed it into silence. And for the first time in uncounted millennia he wondered, was this Saiyan my reflection, or my replacement? The thought rippled through the warp like an unanswered prayer. Around the throne, the machinery of eternity trembled. The custodians on watch shifted uneasily, sensing something in the air, not wrath but thought. Deep within the throne's golden cage, the Emperor's soul turned inward. He saw the Imperium as it now was, immense, unyielding, magnificent, and stagnant. A civilization that worshipped him with blind faith, that obeyed without question, that had turned survival into ritual. For 10,000 years he had ruled through obedience because he feared chaos. But now he understood what the Saiyan had shown, that true order is not the absence of freedom, but its mastery. Strength without choice, he murmured to himself, is still slavery. The words echoed through his own mind like confession. His psychic grip, which had stretched over humanity's collective soul for eons, began to loosen, gently, deliberately. Across the galaxy, countless psychers gasped as the divine pressure eased. In hive worlds and monasteries, priests felt the sudden lightness of unfiltered thought. Machines hummed with new rhythms, ungoverned by divine compulsion. Humanity, for the first time in ages, could think not as servants, but as beings of will. The Emperor's presence dimmed, yet it was not a weakness. It was released. The light from his form softened, golden flames settling into a quiet, living glow. He watched, and he saw change. Small, fragile acts of rebellion, not against him, but for life. A painter on Mars who dared depict the sky as it might have been before pollution. A soldier on Cadia who questioned whether faith must always demand blood. A child on Terra who looked at the twin statues in the cathedral and smiled, not knowing which was which, only that both faces made her feel safe. The Emperor's lips curved faintly, not in triumph, not in regret, but in something deeper. Understanding. Perhaps this is what it means to live, he whispered. For so long he had sought perfection through control, fearing the chaos that freedom bred. Yet the Saiyan, that impossible visitor from another cosmos, had embodied what even gods forget. That will is sacred precisely because it risks failure. That to exist without choice is to never truly exist at all. The throne pulsed softly beneath him, as if agreeing. Its machinery adapted to his change, harmonizing instead of restraining. In the warp, the golden light that once dominated the psychic tides now flickered with nuance, still holy but gentler, patient. The Emperor closed his eyes, the first gesture of rest since the heresy. He did not dream of conquest. He dreamed of possibility. Outside, the galaxy continued its quiet evolution. The cult of the Iron Sun grew, not as rebellion but as complement. The balance he had once resisted now accepted as truth. And beyond the reach of any prayer, in the deep where stars are born, the iron sun's flame burned on, guiding ships through the dark, unseen but never absent. The Emperor's final thought before silence was a whisper across time, reaching toward that distant light. "Thank you, Prince. You reminded me what gods forget." The void had never been so quiet. No fleets, no prayers, no wars echoing through the fabric of time. Only the hum of existence, the soft vibration of galaxies breathing in the dark. Vegeta drifted through it all, a lone spark crossing the sea of eternity. His armor, once forged for battle, now gleamed faintly under starlight, dulled by peace rather than ruin. His aura was no longer a storm, it was a rhythm, a heartbeat of gold and violet that pulsed with the calm of a being who no longer needed to prove anything. He passed through the edges of creation, where stars were still forming, vast clouds of dust and color twisting into new life. He paused to watch one ignite, its light blooming into being. The explosion of energy reminded him of the first time he discovered power, back when he thought strength was an end, not a beginning. "Another sun," he murmured, almost smiling. The universe never stopped starting over. Farther he went, past shattered worlds and those reborn. He saw civilizations rising from ruins he once would have conquered, now shaping their own destinies without gods to guide or restrain them. He did not interfere. He only watched, silent witness to creation's fragile persistence. Sometimes he lingered near dying stars. Their slow collapse reminded him of his own journey, the pride that once burned too fiercely, the silence that had cooled it into something purer. Each fading sun whispered a truth he no longer resisted. Endings were not failure, only transitions. At last he found it, a quiet world, small and unmarked, orbiting twin suns that cast warm orange light across a sea of glass and sand. There was no sound but the wind, no monuments, no faith, no battlefields, just the hum of nature, soft and infinite. He descended gently, his boots sinking into the pale dust. The air shimmered with the heat of both suns, their twin lights merging into one horizon. Vegeta walked until he reached a high ridge overlooking the desert, then sat cross-legged upon the stone. For the first time in eons, he allowed himself stillness. He closed his eyes. His aura flickered once, then dimmed to a faint halo, not extinguished, but serene. The power within him was vast, yet he no longer needed to wield it. Every breath carried balance. Every heartbeat echoed harmony. In the silence he spoke, not to gods, not to ghosts, but to the universe itself. "Power means nothing," he said quietly, "if it cannot create light." The words drifted upward, absorbed by the sky. One of the twin suns flared briefly, as if in response. A soft wind moved through the valley, scattering the dust into spirals of gold. Vegeta smiled faintly, eyes half open, watching as the light danced across the horizon. He wasn't waiting for battle, destiny, or redemption. He had already found them in the simple act of being. And so, the god who once defied gods sat beneath the twin suns of a nameless world, neither ruler nor warrior, but witness, a flame that had learned peace. Across the cosmos, unseen but felt, the light of the iron sun pulsed once more, gentle, endless, alive. Wise stood at the edge of a quiet nebula, staff balanced lightly in his fingers, listening to the shimmer between seconds, a pattern-threaded starlight, a soft rhythm pulsing beneath reality. He tilted his head, amused. "He's no longer bound by time," he murmured, "not traveling it, resonating through it." On the god of destruction's world, Beerus reclined on a floating stone and pretended not to care. His ear twitched. The ripples pressed against his skin like sunlight under water. "TCH," he said, hiding a smile. The stubborn prince finally did it. On a distant veranda, Bulma checked a new instrument pointed at the void. The readout climbed, fell, then steadied into a heartbeat she could not explain. "Good," she whispered. Elsewhere, Goku paused on a remote field, sensing a warmth he could not chase. "See you out there, Vegeta," he said. Across another cosmos, in a millennium of prayer and iron, scribes of the Adeptus Administratum tracked an anomaly no chart could frame. A pulse rolled through the immaterium at measured intervals, not storm, not omen tone. The cult Mechanicus named it the resonance of iron and wrote formulae that circled back to awe. Ecclesiarchs called it a sign that the Emperor's light had learned a second hymn. Navigators swore their third eye brightened when it passed, as if a friendly star blinked from beyond. In lecture vaults on Terra, scholars argued over origin and meaning. Some said it was a residual echo from the abyssal war, the cosmos flexing a healed scar. Others insisted it was a well-made waveform, a covenant still humming between two suns. The youngest scholars said nothing, they simply listened because listening felt correct. On Mars, Amagos tuned cathedral-sized antennae until the pulse harmonized with the thrum of engines. The manufactorum floor vibrated gently, 1,000 machine spirits calmed. The Migos recorded a line in a private log. Integration without subjugation is possible. He did not pray after writing it. He began improving designs. Across shrine worlds, children learned a lullaby with 2 notes, gold and violet. No one remembered who wrote it. They sang it anyway, and nightmares visited less often. Guard regiments carved a small crown beside the Aquila, not as defiance but as reminder. Courage may stand alone and still belong. Sometimes the pulse arrived during great decisions. A Lord Militant signed a treaty instead of ordering a purge. A rogue trader turned back from an easy raid and built a port where refugees could land. A minor planetary governor stepped from a balcony, looked at a restless crowd, and spoke without fear. None of them remembered why the choice felt lighter that day. The warp noticed too. It muttered when the resonance passed, as if a hand smoothed wrinkled water. Korn snarled but found his rage curving around. Sudden clarity strikes landed truer, and for a moment he hated that. Tezinke Weitei, 1,000 eyes, and lost interest in 3 futures that no longer required his lies. Slanesh held still, surprised to learn that quiet could taste like victory. Nurgle patted a new bloom and called it patience. Wise traced the rhythm in the air, each tapping a bell. A song with 2 singers, he said. One seated, one walking. Beerus cracked an eye, annoyed at being caught smiling. If he ever gets unbearably smug, I'm destroying that planet. Wise chuckled.
Of course, my lord.
I'll pack lunch. In the palace's deepest hush, the Emperor listened without needing ears. The sound passed through the throne and into him, neither petition nor demand. It asked nothing, it confirmed. He allowed himself a breath that was almost a laugh, and for a moment the Astronomican shone like morning instead of warning. The pulse crossed gulfs, circled back, and did not fade. It stitched realities where borders had been, reminded old enemies that victory had shapes other than conquest, and taught friends to cherish silence as carefully as triumph. In both universes, temples and training grounds, laboratories and nurseries, people paused and lifted their heads at the same invisible hour, and the stars kept the time in endless measure. Even silence can shake universes. This is how they remember, not with monuments, but with resonance. The stars are quieter now, not because fire has forgotten how to burn, but because the universe finally remembers how to listen. Power ends, faith fades, yet will remain. I have crossed gods who called themselves inevitable and watched mortals refuse to kneel when inevitability arrived. I have seen hymns hold back darkness for a heartbeat, and fists rewrite the shape of night. I believed the answer was victory. I was wrong. Victory is an echo, purpose is the voice. I sought to rule, to place my name above creation and crown the silence with conquest. I mistook fear for order, speed for wisdom, survival for meaning. The abyss taught me nothing until I learned to be still. In stillness, pride stopped shouting and began to see. The Emperor showed me a burden shaped like a throne. The Imperium showed me devotion sharpened into a blade. Chaos showed me hunger that devours itself. From all of them, I took one lesson. Strength without balance is just another collapse waiting to happen. Look at the galaxies turning like slow sparks drifting from a hammer's strike. Every world believes its light must dominate. Every empire believes endurance is proof of truth. But stars die, and their ashes teach different lessons. When a sun burns out, there is no tyrant to mourn, only space enough for something gentler to begin. I do not grieve endings anymore. I listen for beginnings, thin as breath, bright as the first cry of a newborn star. I have been called heretic, king, savior, monster, equal. None of these names fit, and all of them do. Names are the scaffolds we build when the sky is too large for our hands. I wear only one now. Witness. I witnessed the courage of soldiers who stamped prayers into the mud and still stood. I witnessed engineers who sang to machines until the machines learned patience. I witnessed enemies who became mirrors, and mirrors that became doors. When I fought beside the Emperor, we held a line that was not drawn on maps. It ran through the center of what makes life resist oblivion. His light gathered faith and gave it purpose. My flame gathered will and gave it direction. Between us, we found a symmetry that did not ask for surrender. It only asked for honesty. Balance is not peace without cost. Balance is a debt paid every moment by choice. Listen closely. The warp mutters less when songs have two notes. The void travels smoother when engines hum with more than fear. Children sleep through the night because the stars keep better time. These are small victories, invisible on banners, immortal in consequence. If empires must praise something, let them praise restraint. If warriors must swear by anything, let them swear by the light they refuse to extinguish in others. I will not pretend I am gentle. I was forged by hunger, sharpened by humiliation, tempered by refusal. But I learned to hold the blade by the flat, not the edge. A sword that never returns to its scabbard forgets the hand it guards. A sun that never yields becomes a barren wind. Power means nothing if it cannot create light. Light means nothing if it refuses to share. You ask what remains when legends end and monuments sleep. Listen. The answer is rhythm. A pulse traveling outward through distances that do not notice your calendars. Will be quiet. Choice-made music. Some will call it providence, others will call it physics. I call it practice, the discipline of tending flame without burning the house, of lifting worlds without demanding their knees. I am not leaving, I am becoming more precise. My aura loosens, filament by filament, turning from fire into a constellation of sparks. Each joins a path a traveler will someday need. Each warms a room where two enemies will one day speak like men instead of symbols. I give myself to the commons of the night. You will not see me, but you will feel decisions becoming lighter where cruelty once dragged them down. Remember this: no throne is eternal, no chaos complete. The universe is a workshop, not a courtroom. Fail and try again. Build and break and build kinder. If gods scream, remind them that silence is part of every song. If darkness gathers, gather hands. If victory tempts you to carve your name across the sky, carve a door instead. I walked into conflict to prove that I could not be bent. I leave as proof that I do not need to bend others to exist. The Iron Prince ceases, but his echo remains, not as command, but as invitation. Walk, choose, balance, make light. And if you forget me, remember the cadence. Breathe, choose, build, forgive, begin again, and keep the light alive. The golden throne stirred. For 10,000 years, its gears had groaned under the weight of eternity, its radiance flickering between agony and duty. But now, the hum has changed. The machinery that bound the Emperor no longer screamed, it sang. A single breath rippled through the chamber, carrying the scent of ozone and dust, the sound of chains loosening. The custards who stood vigil did not move, yet every one of them felt it. That subtle tremor of divinity breathing again. High above the throne, the Astronomicon flared in sudden brilliance, its golden light flooding through stained glass and spilling into the Terran dawn. The Emperor opened his eyes. They were not the merciless suns that once burned with command. They were softer, alive, reflecting something more than dominion, understanding. Around him, the golden aura that had once been an instrument of control expanded like a sigh, warm and infinite. Across the planet, priests dropped to their knees, but this time their prayers were not desperate. They were gentle. Beyond terror, in the dark expanse between worlds, two lights began to move. One shimmered with gold, steady and regal. The other burned violet, fierce yet calm. Slowly, they drew toward one another, twin flames across the night. Where they touched, the void itself seemed to breathe, a heartbeat stretching from one universe to the next. The choirs of terror felt it before they heard it. Their voices rose in tongues no human had ever spoken, yet every word felt familiar. The song was not of praise, but of balance, of two suns that burned without consuming, two wills that met without conquest. It carried through the warp, washing over distant fleets and sleeping worlds. Humanity lifted its eyes to the heavens and, for the first time in millennia, felt warmth untainted by fear. In the Manufactoria, the machine spirits hummed in harmony. On shrine worlds, pilgrims wept without knowing why. Across the galaxy, the light of both suns touched every shadow, not as judgment but as invitation. In that moment, the boundaries between mortal and divine blurred. The Emperor remained upon his throne, guardian of faith and flame. Yet the golden light that once caged him now radiated outward, a circle, not a crown. And somewhere far beyond sight, in the heart of the void, the iron sun flared one last time. A voice, neither human nor celestial, echoed through creation, quiet but unmistakable. From pride came peace, from war, creation. From the Prince, eternity. The twin suns aligned, their glow merging into one eternal horizon. Gold and violet became white, not blinding, but whole. On Terra, the Emperor smiled. In distant galaxies, stars burned brighter. And for a fleeting, perfect instant, the universe forgot what it meant to be divided. The screen faded to black. The light remained,